Good evening and welcome to the Village of Westmont meeting for Thursday, April 22nd. Clerk, please take the roll call.
Mayor Ron.
Here.
The clerk's here. Trustee Emery.
Here.
Trustee Fleming.
Here.
Trustee Forsley.
Here.
Trustee Klebanow.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
Trustee Seneca.
Here.
Manager Searle.
Here.
Finance Director Von Bagen.
Here.
Police Chief Mulhern. Here. Fire Chief Trout. Here. Deputy Police Chief Gunther. Here. Human Resource Administrator Casey. Budget Analyst Parker.
Here.
Deputy Police Chief King. Here. Public Works Director May. Public Works Water Supervisor Ramsey. Fire Administrative Officer Scala. EMS Coordinator Drawley. Deputy Fire Chief Black.
Thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we're going to begin our discussion this evening regarding the budget with the fire department, but I'm not sure if the manager has anything he wants to add.
Just to briefly, Mayor, go through the schedule for this evening. As we learned last night, we need to be aware of the pace to try to get through things tonight. We're going to start off with the fire department, then we're going to go to convention tourism, then we're going to cover the employee benefit sick fund, the vehicle replacement fund, capital projects, water operating, motor fuel, and IMRF, Social Security, and then final brief discussion on the emergency reserve fund. And then at the conclusion, we'd like an executive session to discuss personnel. So at this point, I turn over to our finance director, Lisa Van Bagen.
Thank you. I'd like to direct everybody's attention to where we have been starting the workshops in Section 1, the fund summaries that have been updated since the last budget workshop. We've updated after the items that were discussed yesterday, and the staff was given direction to make changes into the budget as proposed. So what we now have is a projected net in the general fund of $239,915. If we look at the items for consideration and immediate reductions, which is in the same section behind the first red tab, we have an update on the immediate reductions on the actions that were decided last evening, and I want to go over what those were, and then the items that we still have for discussion that have been added as well. We discussed the Westmont Chamber of Commerce external funding, and the direction was given to remove $12,500 from that line item. That was removed. There was also a $1,400 for chamber membership that was removed. That was a duplication. The calendar and newsletter remain in the budget as originally proposed, with the comment that that will be discussed further after the budget process at the A&F committee level. In economic development, there was an item in there for $300 for vision testing that was removed. There were conferences and training, a total of $2,840 that was agreed to be removed. And the duplication of the web Q&A licensing that was both in the IT department and the economic development fund, that was removed for $1,200. We also had for administration the membership in IPMA HR for $330. And then there was the addition of police part-time CSO 40 hours per week May through October added to patrol for $17,760. And then we had removed patrol officers' salaries and insurance from May through June, so that was to offset the confusion that we had regarding when people were going to be hired and what needed to be in there at what level. And then we added back into fleet the tire changer and balancer for $10,000. On the items for discussion where decisions were not made, but we decided to put those on the list to discuss at a later date. We have the Fire and Police Commission training for $1,500 that remains in the budget, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission advertising for $12,000 that we were waiting for some additional information on, I believe, from the Economic Development Department in order to be able to make a decision. And I think Ron handed out some information on that yesterday, but we did not have an opportunity to discuss that further after that. So Were there any questions on any of those items, any corrections? Other comments, nothing? Okay, are you guys, did you ever have any problems with your?
I don't have that page.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Sorry, I got some.
I didn't want to
Pass
make-
those down. All right, sorry about that. Okay, we're going to now go on to Section 5, or Section 6, I'm sorry, the Fire Department. And we'll start with an overview of the Fire Protection District. Expenses, once again, are at $30,000. This is the 2% foreign fire insurance property tax that is levied and is a legal obligation that goes through here and then is for the Fire Protection District. There's been no changes in that amount or anything on there, so pretty much status quo. Next would be fire suppression and control. Total expenses for the upcoming fiscal year are $1,884,525, which is a 4.8% decrease of $94,065. There were significant reductions in vehicle maintenance, as well as exchanging pagers for cell phones with text messaging, which reduces the expenses in that division. There we have federal grants that we have this year. I believe it's $50,000 for air compressors. Last year we had equipment grants of about $290,000, and this year we're at $50,000. Deputy Chief Weiss and the fire department continue to aggressively research and apply for grant funding, as they do every year, for equipment and anything available to them for the department. Are there any questions on suppression and control?
Lisa, just unless I'm misreading, this is just a typo. Right after the yellow page, what's the suppression? Is that last 1,884,000? It says 745 on
Yeah,
this?
it's actually been updated to the 525. That was, when we talked about yesterday, we had insurance changes that were done that were
okay.
minor and did not get a chance to update that bottom chart. So the figures that are on the PowerPoints are all updated.
Those are the
and you'll
correct
see
ones.
minor changes
Okay.
to the histories due to those. And they're all very, very, very minor. So it's $200, not even $200.
I have a question regarding, at the bottom of the second page into the top of the third, everything's itemized out, pants, shirts, hoods, gloves, et cetera. And then at the top of the third page, it just generalizes winter wear and summer wear for $9,500. How can we get some itemization and then just a, $9,500 bulk there?
You're receiving a response from the fire
Well,
department.
we have winter wear and summer wear for $9,500. That's exactly what it is. It's one group of summer wear and one group of winter wear. The winter wear is sweatshirts, period. The summer wear is collared polo shirts, period. There is no additional stuff in there, and that's just how we classify those items.
How many do you get?
We have 70 members on our fire department, and I believe that's a real close dollar amount. If not, maybe a little bit less in here, because what we plan on doing is, if you need a sweatshirt now, turn it in, and then we'll get you one, instead of just buying everybody one.
Okay, those are, just seems to me when you do the division by 70, that's awful expensive sweatshirts and polo shirts.
The sweatshirts themselves are, I believe they're about $45 a piece, roughly, for those. The polo shirts, I cannot comment on exactly what those prices are for those.
They're embroidered, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They have the Westmont logo on them, and we put the name on them, and we also put the rank on there.
Okay, and then versus the shirts where you purchase 50 at $38.50 each. Are those just the blue duty shirts?
Yeah, those are what we call a Class B shirt that you would wear, like this is a Class B shirt, short sleeve, long sleeve shirts.
Okay. Also, towards the bottom of page 3, janitorial supplies is just a miscellaneous $5,300. We have seen every other department pretty much lay out everything, and obviously most of, 99.9% of fire department's budget is likewise. So I do have to ask about when I see something that's miscellaneous for $5,300.
The janitorial supplies, we could break that down if you would like. What that covers is all of our dish detergent that we buy, the laundry soap, the toilet bowl cleaner, toilet paper, paper towels. It's everything that we would be purchased in the janitorial supplies. We could break it down and itemize it for what the particular items are going to be, if you would like. It covers hand soap.
Okay, as long as we have your assurances, is this based on actual cost from last year or this current year?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And things like paper towels and toilet tissue and Kleenex and all of that, are we using one vendor for that, for each department? Are we getting any economy of scale?
I was just going to ask, with the facilities manager, I would think if we've got somebody that's doing that, that ought to...
But could we look, if we're not doing that, I'd like to see us look into that. There'd certainly be a savings with a volume discount, I would think.
Just on paper products alone.
Well, on everything.
Yeah, I mean, all of it instead of each department.
Right, because we've got it, we see it outlined
Every
in the
department
police
has their own.
Right. And everybody, even administration and all that. So, this is a lot of stuff.
I can't answer specifically to paper towels or anything, but we were doing a lot of that in a lot of ways, and Mike Chorney is doing that. I know there was a big project on office supplies and getting a vendor and pooling all that together. We mentioned like the light bulbs yesterday. So every opportunity they'll look into something, and then we're slowly picking away at all of it. But I can't tell you confidently right now which ones are done that way right now, but the goal is to do exactly what you're saying.
Great.
Questions of me or?
The only this is probably of Lisa, where you have on page 4 for the other expenditures, the state grant expenses and federal grant expenses. Are those amounts under our general revenue columns, and then would they balance out since you have them as expenses, but they're not technically our money?
Correct. Our philosophy on the grants is if we have either gotten confirmation that we will be getting the grant, or if we have a reasonable amount of certainty that we will be, we put the revenue in and the expenses and then our portion on as well. So you'll see if it's a non-matching grant, the $5,500, you'll see where there are revenue accounts that correspond with those. Or if there's a small, like the small equipment grant is $24,000, that's the whole amount. We have also, you'll see things like the federal portion is $4,500. So we would look and see $4,500 in revenue, and then our portion is the additional $5,000.
Yeah, the $45,000.
Right.
Because I'm looking at the fund summary to see where they would, in the budgeted revenues, where grants land.
It would be under the individual department. The departments do get credited for any of the grants that they get. So if you look under the fire revenue, they have a fire grants, and you'd see then that 45, and it's in it's Fund 01, the account 3323 for state, and 3343 for the federal.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just looking at the summaries to see if it itemizes out grants, but it does.
Yeah.
That's fine. You've explained it. Thank you.
Yeah, it does.
On the wages part-time, there's a list of a number of things there. Kids camp operations, prom night, high school football, Ty Warner, July 4th, and so on and so on. Is that something the village, we pay out? We don't get anything back for that when they do these?
These are all adjustments, I believe, to reductions in their salaries or their pay as of last year.
Yeah, the majority of these changes were made last year. We just included them to make sure that it was noted that they're not planning to do additional specific, having an extra ambulance there for these events.
Oh, okay, so these aren't, okay.
These are not,
Gotcha.
these are things that we have done in the past. We did not do them this year.
Okay, they're not.
Although we are able to have an ambulance there, and then if it gets called away, it gets called away. Previously, we had extra staff and extra ambulance there to make sure there was coverage.
So that's why the little minus in front of it, so
Yes.
it's...
Exactly. And, and some of them may actually say, reduced shift incentive or reduced, and others will say removed. But if there was the negative there, those were items that were adjustments that were made to take those out, and those remain as out.
Is there anything reflected in here, or where would we find it if there's changes to the TCOs for fire, changes to dispatch? Where would it be reflected if it ends up that there's, like a split and they go with tri-state or whatever? Where would we see it in a budget later on?
You know what, we haven't made any determinations on that, if we would continue to have, say, a communications department and just have all the expenses go through there, or if we would itemize it and put a portion of it through for police and a portion into the fire department for their section. That would be direction that we would get from the board on how you wanted it distributed and how it would work best for reporting purposes.
Okay, I was just curious where we'd put it in the budget. All right.
Since we've always had a communications, a dispatch, we've always had their own department for that. So if we're starting fresh with something different, we could do it anyway.
Okay, so just a quick clarification. The year-to-date numbers that we're looking at, is that through March 31st?
That's through...
Probably.
The actuals.
Yeah. Because the reports, it depends on when we updated them and printed, so each of the departments, and I don't think suppression and control was reprinted, so this would have been through at some point in time in March before the books went out.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have a date on them for that they were updated as of through. It's just the year-to-date, and the system itself doesn't apply an actual date on the report, so... Definitely not through the end of the fiscal year since we're still in it.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions for suppression and control?
Well, I just have, I just want to go on record since I pretty much grilled everybody yesterday. I think that if you're buying in bulk shirts, $71 for a sweatshirt is astronomical. So that's my opinion.
The other thing that I would ask under conferences and training and dues and subscriptions, under dues and subscriptions, the code books that you're showing in here, are those also imaged like what we have in the Economic Development Department? Is this another set of different books, or is this same? Is that...
That's a question for the fire department staff.
We do have separate sections. Some of the books that they do have, yes, it would be a duplicate type book, but we do have our own sections that we follow.
Could you real quick, Chief, go through the conferences and training and what each one of these are and what they do?
I'll explain those for you. The fire prevention classes, seminars, and then you got CFAI there. Those are, a majority of that fire prevention classes are for their international certification for code. All the inspectors are trying to get certified as international or national code certified, which in turn will improve their ability to be able to answer questions when they're out doing inspections or whatever they need to be doing. So it's an advanced certification that we put in as a goal for our inspectors to get. Seminars, there's very few seminars that the inspectors go to. We've cut those back quite a bit. Only the ones that we need to send somebody that there might be some updated information that's changing out there from the Illinois inspectors or international. There's been a lot going on with residential sprinkler information, so we're sending one person, he'll go, they'll bring the information back, type of thing. The specialty teams there, cause and origin, dive, hazmat, TRT, that's minimum amount of money that we need in there to keep members on those individual teams recertified every year. And we're just paying to get their recertifications. The Chiefs Illinois seminar, the Illinois Chiefs has a symposium in May and then a conference in October. What the first one is the symposium. That amount pays for the fire chief's registration in his hotel, and then plus registration for one of the other two deputy chiefs, but there is no coverage for hotel or anything else. The second Chiefs Illinois conference there, that's our conference in October. And again, that's the same thing, registration for the fire chief, hotel, and then registration for one of the other two deputies. International Chiefs, FRI, that's the International Fire Chiefs Conference that's held in August every year. Some of you have been to that before when we got our accreditation plaques. The reason that amount is lower this year is because that conference is being held in Chicago. So registrations for the chief, obviously there's not going to be any hotel costs or anything else. There could be some parking fees. There might be some meal things in there, but and then registration for the other two deputies it's being held in Chicago. Also underneath that, you see VCOS, that's the Volunteer Combination Chiefs Conference that's held every year in November. Included in that $2,000 is, the chief's registration, his hotel, any meals, and then one of the deputies' registrations only. I pretty much have been going to that every year because I'm on the International VCOS Committee and represent the department and been paying for a hotel and all my airline and all that on my own. So, and then the manuals, books, and textbooks. Again, those are ISTA manuals. Those are for firefighters. Every year they change the volume or the edition, and the firefighters are taking state certifications, so they need the proper editions to be able to study from. So every year we have to replace not all of them. There's like 25 ISTA manuals. We have a set in each station so the guys can, when they're in the station, can be studying. And so that's what that's for.
Good.
I'd like to add that our inspectors need to keep their skills level to exceed or at least meet the same as the building department inspectors. And so when the building department inspectors go to courses which they're updating their knowledge and maybe some of the codes which we're doing, we have to also do the same thing so we're all on the same page, reading out the same code books. So when the building department, I believe they had sent inspectors to classes this year, then we also have to follow and do that. So that both teams have the same knowledge. The same thing when we're doing our specialty teams, our dive team, hazmat, cause and origin. It's part of our mutual aid agreement. Mutual aid means they send us, we send them. If it's not mutual, then we will no longer get aid. I know a lot of fire departments are having that problem right now with all the cutbacks. I believe Franklin Park cut back to one ambulance. Now they're requiring or requesting their neighboring towns come in and help them. Well, they can't send their ambulance out. Now the neighboring towns are saying, we're not going to send our ambulance in because now our taxpayers are paying for someone else's service. So what we do is to keep the costs low and still meet our obligations for mutual aid. That's where a lot of the training comes in. When we belong to Division 10, MABUS Division 10, there's a cost involved with what we do. But if we would do it on our own, it would exceed our costs greatly. Another thing we have to remember, too, is this mutual aid comes at a time when it's almost like an insurance policy. When we had that tragic event of the car going into the retention pond at 63rd in Richmond, while Westmont had emergency swimmers into the water who were able to bring the woman to shore, we did not have any idea if there were other people in the car. Emergency divers were automatically dispatched with us. Oak Brook divers came into the water because Westmont's divers were out of service. Our squad was out of service that night. We had mutual aid divers come in from Division 10 teams, Oak Brook, and Lyle Woodridge. This is part of the mutual aid agreement. Westmont had no divers available, but through our mutual aid agreement, those divers went into the water, checked the vehicle out to make sure that there was no one else in the vehicle, and also the recovery process of that vehicle. It would still be sitting in the pond if it didn't have fire department divers that go out there, hook the car, and bring the car back in. The towing companies don't do that, neither do the police departments. So we are out there, we are doing what we need to do through mutual aid.
I think, Frank, both mutual aid and the fact that Westmont has all the specialty teams that it does, none of us want to see any of that be cut. So,
without question.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're just trying to give you information so you can make good decisions and know that the fire department is very concerned of our financial resources also.
Mm-hmm. Just a side note, I know that we have taken some criticism for even having a dive team. And, I'll take issue with that, given the number of ponds that we have in this community. And
there's 49 ponds in the
some of which are very deep. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
To the board, I just wanted to direct your attention to a handout that we had that we referenced yesterday but didn't have for you. It's the purple one that says budgeted conferences and training. This breaks out all of the different divisions and departments and what would be classified as a conference versus what is training. And with the training, we're talking about the things like the fire department spoke about and other in-house training or one-day seminars that people are going to, as opposed to a conference that's put on by a professional association, usually with some sort of overnight stay or a long-term, networking type situation. So, because some of the training that we're doing is even in-house that we're paying for, where we see some expenses there. So this breaks out. The conferences are about $18,610, and the training is $81,560 for a total of $100,000 throughout. So.
I just want to add one thing. Just want to add one thing there. If you notice underneath training and conferences, you see training, classes, miscellaneous. You see no dollar figure there. We have no money in our budget next year to send any of the firefighters or officers to any training classes because we felt that it was more important to keep our inspectors and our specialty team people, trained. For many years, we operated with $25,000 or $30,000, and when you got 70 guys, they have recertifications they have to keep up too. We're trying to do as many of those we can internally, but this next year there will be no money. We don't project to promote any officers, so there's no money there for officers classes like we had in the past. And we're going to try and do our advanced firefighter training and stuff internally, but if firefighters want to go get their instructor one or go get their tactics one class, things like that, there won't be money for that the next year. So we'll have to defer that off to other years. So I just wanted to make sure that when you saw that miscellaneous training classes.
What impact would that have on our ASL, if any?
Well, we were this inspected by the fire marshal's office, an audit. They came in and audited us, and we did pass with flying colors. There was just a couple minor things that we had to do with signing our training sheets. But, as long as we keep our internal things going and our current officers have their current certifications, which we all do, we're okay with accreditation and ISO. But if any of the other firefighters want to go take some additional training, which we've always supported, we won't be able to do that. So.
Now, Dave, and that's for next year. That's something we can't continue, though. We're going to have money in the following year and the years. I mean,
well, I think to be clear, you're still doing in-house training.
Right.
These are for outside training opportunities, and these are for things that actually, in the past, have been useful to attract members to our department. It's something they value, and we will continue to train as we need to in-house.
If we have to bring on any new members next year, we have several people leave, and we have to bring on some new members, and they don't have has-been operation certification. That's a requirement. Okay, we have to send them to that. So we're going to have to find the money to send them to that.
Okay.
So those type of things.
I see.
I know one of the things, as Anna Gersero related to, is that's always been one thing that attracted the gentlemen who want to come and work for our town. Is this going to discourage? Are we going to start having trouble with our enough staffing that they're not going to come and want to work at Westmont because we can't give that extra training that we've been doing?
Well, people outside of the department don't know that, but the guys internally, this last year, we didn't have the money to send guys to classes, and they keep on coming to my office, and I keep on saying, still no money. And we try to get creative, and we've done some things with Darien Woodridge with SUFD Training Academy, where they've borrowed an engine for an FE class, or borrowed our reserve ladder truck for their firefighter 2 class. When they borrow our equipment, they give us a couple free spots in these type of classes. So we've been trying to do more of that with SUFD, but they only have so many classes. The other day, our ladder truck went there for the final exam for their full-time academy they have for firefighters. So we picked up a couple more spots. Right now, we have 3 people. We're using 3 of those spots to get 3 of our new guys to get their fire apparatus engineer certification, so they can drive our engines and be able to pump them. So that's the way we're going about doing things now. But and that's what we got to do. Got to work together.
Any other questions in suppression and control? Next would be the ambulance and paramedics. Total expenses are $2,092,210, which is a 3.4% increase, $69,165. The paramedic contract was renegotiated again. There was an increase, but it's still below the original contract amount. So once again, Kurt's working with Village to negotiate a reasonable price and to get through the economic times together. I think we have some decreases to the municipal garage, and other than that, a lot of the expenses in paramedics and ambulance are split between fire suppression and control. So you see references in each of them for wages that are split, as well as some of the other items. Are there any questions regarding items in ambulance and paramedic?
I have a question about the carbon monoxide meter. It shows for 2009 an actual of 3508. Is that the purchase of a new meter? I mean, does it have to be calibrated or anything else done, or do we need another one? What's with that meter? It's on bottom of page 2.
We don't have anything budgeted this year.
No, we don't. Actually, what happened was that we were purchased one meter the year before last, and then for one of the ambulances, and then what we did is we purchased a second one this past year, but it was used with the fire district money. Those do not need to be calibrated, so there's really no expense on them. Of course, it's just batteries. I mean, we're just going through batteries, when we use it. But other than that, The only other expense that could happen is if what it has is a finger plug, or you put it on your fingers, just like when you go into the hospital for a pulse oximetry.
Right.
That's the same exact thing, because it's actually a pulse oximetry as well as reading your CO levels in your bloodstream. And if that breaks, that could be an expense, and that's usually a couple $100. But that also is in that one. I have it into my supplies, maintenance supplies equipment for diagnostic equipment. That is something that I have money in there for those types of things.
Okay, because I saw that there was an actual expense and then nothing budgeted. So
Yes.
that's why I wondered.
Right.
Okay.
That actually, we did get, the second one.
Okay, good.
We also have some good news for you.
In regards to the billing, for Andre's billing, we did renegotiate with them also, and at this time it was 7%, where they would actually take 7% of the cost of collections. We got them down to 5%.
Wow.
So there could be quite a bit decrease. We have it budgeted for $40,200 for this coming year. And what I usually do is, because with collections, it varies, from time to time as to how much we actually bring in as to what we actually pay them monthly. The issue is that if we go down to 5%, we're projecting with the revenue that we are hopefully going to bring in, that with 5% collection, around $29,000 would be their bill. So that's a big decrease, from $40,000 to $200, down to $29,000. But like I said before, that's just projected. We don't really know what we're going to be collecting or anything like that. The issue is that when it does go to ICS, I kind of called because I had really no idea as to how much when it goes to the collection service as to what they take. They take almost 30%. So it's a huge amount. So what we're trying to do is, and I took a look at it, and it's actually 4 months before a bill actually goes to collections. So that's really a long period of time. And the last time I had asked you in regards to when we were talking about the billing changes, did we want to increase that and let them have more time? Maybe up to it's up to you. I kind of left that open to your judgment if you wanted us to leave, more time before we actually sent bills to collections, and something that, you can bring back to us, because we can change that at any time.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Lynn.
That's good news.
It is. We like that. Love that. Any other questions or comments on ambulance and paramedics?
The only other question I have is, some of the supplies are billed as part of the ambulance fee. Like if you use anything like splints or certain equipment, it goes on the bill to the transportee, correct?
Most of the supplies are actually throwaway supplies, so it's really, we don't really bill, the person. Some of the splints, we have air splints, so sometimes we might have to replace the air splint if it gets lost at the hospital. I mean, we're pretty good about collecting our equipment back, but there has been times where, not to our fault, a pair of scissors kind of cuts right through one of our splints, and that's it's irreparable. So we have to actually replace it then, and it has happened before at times. But like blood pressure cuffs and things like that.
Yeah, where do you have the supplies that are chargeable and billable? Obviously, you have to keep your supplies up and current,
We actually get everything from the
that.
hospital. And it was funny that you bring that up, because it actually was something that was brought forward to us yesterday from our advisory board from the hospital, because the drug box that we have in our ambulance, they own those drugs in that drug box. So what happens is that we replace everything at the hospital so that way our drug box stays full. The thing is that when we bill out, especially when we use drugs and that, we actually are billing those patients for those drugs. So the hospital cannot bill them for those drugs that we use. So it's kind of like a wash, where we're actually collecting the money for those drugs, but the hospital's not going to bill us back for it. They want to stay clear, as far away from that as possible, because of Medicare and everything. So in actuality, we're really billing for supplies that we're getting from the hospital.
Okay. All right. Well, that shows why it's not a expense.
Yeah. But like I said, the other supplies, like your blood pressure cuffs, things like that, I have just, I have to, they blow up. They don't last very long. I try to get the ones that we try to last, but for some reason, we use them all the time, and things happen like that. So that's mostly what that supply. And my biggest one is the chemicals, and, that's our gloves and masks and things like that.
Right.
So we need those.
Okay.
Any
thanks.
other questions?
Answered.
Right, next would be the fire EMA. Total expenses for the year are $7,000. That's a 92.6% decrease from last year, which had to do with the elimination of the full-time position that was taken out of the budget last year. So there are no full-time employees in the EMA division. Some of the items that are in there are just general equipment and supplies for $2,000, uniforms for $2,000, a warning siren maintenance for $2,000, conferences and training for $900, and dues and subscriptions for $1,000, and that's for the volunteer EMA workers. Any questions about any of those items? Or Frank, you look like you're anxiously waiting to say something.
Yes, I am. If no one mentioned the word maintenance, and we've worked very hard. Dave? And we'd like to make sure that Dave has done a great job with our maintenance program this year, working with the village staff.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to take a minute to let you know that please continue supporting the fleet in Public Works and Mike Cherney with his staff, because those guys have been fantastic. I call them. They're over the station right away. They're fixing things right on top of stuff. We've had a great amount of increase in dollars that we paid outside for maintenance that has gone way, way down. And it's because of those folks being able. And thank you very much for allowing Fleet to get their lifts, because they can do maintenance on all our vehicles now except for the ladder trucks. So I just want to make, those guys, I tell Steve and Mike all the time, they have great workers in those divisions. So
did you say except the ladder trucks, or the ladder trucks also?
No, they can't do the ladder trucks because the building's not high enough, and they would need 6 lifts, and they only have 4.
Okay. But other than that, they take care of everything else?
They take care of our ambulances, our cars, our fire engines, the heavy squad, everything. They do all our PMs on them now, and any parts that need to be replaced, they're right over there taking care of them. There are some things that we have to send the engines and the squads and the ambulances out for because they don't have certifications in taking care of the pumps on the engines or some of the big motor stuff. Mm-hmm. And they need special certifications, EVT certifications, to be able to do those things. So we've worked out a deal with Lyle Woodridge, and we send those vehicles now to Lyle Woodridge to their maintenance facility, and their maintenance person also, when Phil and Virgil are not available, helps cover both of them, and he'll come to our stations and fix things when they're not available. So we have a great program set now, and it's working really good, and it's really proven to save a lot of money. So
wonderful.
We do. We work our programs to the best interest of the village. I know that it was at least 20 years ago we were asking to do certain things with the lift and to work with the village garage, and it didn't come about. But now it has, and it's a great benefit to the village. Matter of fact, even the mechanic at Lyle who works on our equipment, we may be able to work a deal with him where he'll come to Westmont, work as a firefighter paramedic, and also do maintenance on our vehicles right here rather than send them there. And be a very, very great cost-effective move. So we're constantly looking at ways and personnel in which to keep the costs down. There was a question the last time around. Trustee Fleming was asking about accreditation. The cost on that was approximately $1,100 a year, and then the time that they come in here and do the overall, which is every 5 years, that costs approximately $5,000, and about 25% of that is taken up through IRMA. And So that's approximately where the cost is now. Craig and I were at an accreditation meeting yesterday. We were looking at accreditation at ISO. I know there was a question about where we're going to be at with ISO and accreditation, especially in the future. And accreditation at this time is and ISO are getting together, and ISO is looking at giving us credits for going through the accreditation process. So we may, if we lose something, we may be able to pick it up just the fact that we're an accredited agency. And so it's another positive for the village, and so we're looking at all avenues in which to maintain our high standard. A lot of fire departments are out there that have volunteer, POC, and part-time people, but no department out there brings them to the level of competence that Westmont has, and so which we were noted by the mayor's managers this last spring. So we're charging it forward, and we'll answer any and all questions if possible. Thanks.
Do you know when you're going to have to go through the full accreditation again? How far into it?
That'll be next year.
So it is coming up.
Yeah.
So we'll have to budget for it the next.
Yeah, and what we're still, we'll be working with other agencies, and the accreditation people know that here in the U.S. we're under a heavy budget for all departments, so they're trying to do things and work with us. Craig, is there anything additional? Craig is our accreditation manager and has done a fantastic job with that. Craig wears about 3 or 4 different hats, as do other members of the department. Craig?
Just to let, with the accreditation process where we stand, they're expected to come in here next summer sometime. That gives us our 5 years is up. And that's where this cost will come in then. We have a lot of work to do up to that time because of the change in dispatch systems. That's going to be a big deal for us. So that's going to take a lot of time. Out of all the agencies, fire agencies, there's 134 of them that are accredited only throughout the whole United States. And I believe the count was from 44,000 fire departments and fire districts. So the number isn't very high, and there's another 400 out there that are attempting to go for this at this point in time. So out of 134 out of that number, we're doing very well, and we stand up there. In the area, us, Naperville, Winnetka, Park Ridge is about the only ones that are accredited. So it'd be a program that it really shows how disciplined we are. Businesses look at this when they come into town, or ISO rating, or accreditation, and where we stand with that. So it's something that we'd really like to continue with. So, thank you.
With EMA, I just have a quick question on EMA. Since we no longer have a paid salary position, who facilitates the activities of that group? Who do they report to? Who's overseeing that organization?
Me. What has happened is this: when we had that, when we eliminated that position this last year, all those duties and assignments were split up with the existing staff. Okay. And so I took over the EMA end of things. Dave Weiss took over vehicles and facility maintenance, and Craig picked up the rest.
Okay.
All right. So between the three of us, we keep things going.
I want to make sure that we can retain that group.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Matter
critical.
of fact,
it's critical.
That group has expanded and are flourishing at this time. That's because of the able leadership that is already existing there. And Ed Jenkins, 30 years, and the amazing thing, he lives in Clarendon Hills. But he is totally devoted to Westmont emergency management. And same thing with Dave Lincoln, who's the other deputy director. These people are doing a great job. And then we have our other teams and captains and training, and everybody has just stepped up this last year and has done a fantastic job for us.
I don't know what we would do without them, so.
Well, I think one of the things that I was surprised too is because a lot of them had the pagers and they're getting rid of the pagers. So now we have to rely on our personal cell phones for text messaging, which meant a lot of us had to go and get some kind of a package deal because of all the messages coming through and stuff. And I know Ed was the same.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably one of the last ones to give up that pager because now he has to go and do it, and it's all coming out of pocket. So it's really great of them.
Yeah, thank you. And Patty is one of our loyal members also. And but we, it's just like our pagers. We're cutting expenses in all areas, and here are people who don't get paid for anything, and yet they'll go out and spend their own money to still belong to the team and do the right stuff for the village.
Yeah.
So
Lorenzo's coming in from where? I mean,
he lives out by Aurora somewhere.
Yeah, or Plainfield or something.
So anyway, we have people that are really all over the place, and they do a great job. They work with us with our dive team. There's special dedicated members for that. We broke it down into different teams in which we have immediate responders, and it's broken down to 3 teams right now. And so they're doing an outstanding job. They, again, were out there the other night at the pond for the rescue with their lighting equipment and traffic control. And I know Chief Mulhern has congratulated them and acknowledged them also. All of our different functions, you'll always see EMA members there throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything additional related to EMA or the fire department? Because that's the last division of the fire department that we're going to be discussing, which also concludes the general fund discussions. That's the last department that we had to cover for the general fund. We would be moving on to our convention and tourism fund now. If no one has any questions or anything, I'll move on to that. Expenses for the convention and tourism fund for the upcoming year are $54,000. That's a 44.9% decrease of $44,000. Two of the items that are in there in terms of expenses are the Westmont Auto Group funding of $24,000 and the property improvement grants of $30,000. As we mentioned in legislation in the general fund, several of the items and expenses that were previously paid for out of the convention and tourism fund, and as we were using up the reserves of that fund, we continued to keep them in there. However, they have been moved now to that general fund. So we did discuss those under legislation. So you'll see there's really only the 2 items now in the Convention and Tourism Fund, the Westmont Auto Group and the property improvement grants that remain. And we would keep those in there or keep funding anything that we have as long as there are reserves in here. We can continue because there are no new revenue streams into this fund. This is merely using up the final hotel-motel tax reserves that were in the fund.
Lisa, the improvement one, the $30,000. If we don't use it that year, it's just regular general funds at this point, then, right? So.
Right, it just stays in the Convention and Tourism Fund. So
it doesn't accumulate to the next year?
No.
So.
As you can see, there were no applications or no payouts in 2009 or 2010 fiscal year to date for that $30,000. So we have just continued to keep it at that level. If the board wanted to change that, we would do that during the budget process, but it remained at $30,000 for the past 2 years and 3 years, I believe. And
I was going to say, I don't remember people coming in and asking for it.
Yeah, there haven't been any requests for it. So the funds just stay there and it gets rebudgeted. And that's one of the reasons that we have the higher reserves than we had anticipated is we don't have any grants going out for the past several years. And you can see the notes underneath conferences and training, dues and subscriptions and grants for the account numbers that they were moved to in legislation in the general fund. Are there any questions on that portion of the Convention and Tourism Fund? The other half of the Convention and Tourism Fund is our Westmont Center revenues and expenses. We have revenue of $49,810, which primarily is the rent for the building, and then $1,100 in interest income. That is a 17% decrease of $10,400. That was just decreases in interest income. The rents remained static. So as our reserves have gone down and expenses have been out, obviously we're accumulating less interest income, less invested, less earnings, besides the fact that rates have continued to drop and are next to nothing. So we're not seeing any real significant interest income there. There's a breakdown in the pie chart of the rental incomes by each of our current tenants there.
Lisa, can I ask a question? I'm not looking for any kind of a raise on this, but I'd just like to know, what are we charging per square foot for the tenants?
Ron, what's the square footage amount for the rent? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I'm sorry?
Do you remember what the square footage for rent is? We did just reevaluate that based on...
The cost per square foot?
Or what we charge.
$7 something per square foot, I think.
Is what we're charging, yeah.
It's cheap.
I can look it up.
And we did did an evaluation this year. Ron took a look at what the maintenance and upkeep expenses are, and we did not make an adjustment to that based on the fact that it was still in line with what the rent was.
Well, we examined our maintenance costs and actually determined they were slightly lower than what they were 3 years ago. And a big part of that was the fact that we had reduced our overtime expenses by hiring a part-time custodial person.
So the fee for that was decided for the square footage by what formula?
We added
It's actually
all the expenses of the building to maintain the whole building, and then to prorate it, because the tenants all have different size spaces. So it was just divided into the total square footage, and then proportionally charged each tenant.
So it's a break-even type of a...
Yeah, it's to make sure it doesn't cost us.
Right. At least for the daily maintenance and upkeep, it certainly doesn't put anything aside for replacing a roof or anything like that, but at least to do the maintenance and custodial for the building.
Okay. So it's costing. As the space at the college at DuPage rents, does that remain static? They continue to use the space, all of the space that they've rented, and for their classes. That's almost 50% of the rent, and that's steady income. And there's been no drops in classes. And
you mean in terms of the
usage of the facility?
Honestly, I don't know how well their classes have been attended, if that's what you're asking. That's something I can find out.
And I know it does change term to term, and there might be some space that isn't necessarily used for several weeks, but then they fill it the next term. So they are still interested in occupying all that space.
Okay.
As best I know.
Even though they don't use it all the time.
Yeah, they want to use it all the time, so their goal is to fill it.
Okay. That's great.
Is the board interested in seeing a breakout of the costs? Because I do have the spreadsheet. I can easily print that for you.
Well, I figured out what it was per month, so I was just wondering per square foot, because I don't know what the square footage is of each of the offices.
The total usable space is about a little under 10,000 for the whole building. And that includes the community room.
It's budgeted expenses that it appears that it's costing us about, $7,000 next year it'll cost us for everything to stay as it is at Westmont, with nothing in reserves for if there needs a major repair of something, apparently. Do we rent out that downstairs ever?
I don't.
Well, that's something we had talked about at one time.
Yeah, we developed a policy. Right. It got to the committee level. We had talked about a fee structure, and then a decision was made not to rent it out to the community groups. And it was after that point in time that the board looked at the whole question again, and that's when we developed a model for charging the cost for the maintenance for the existing tenants, and that's when we negotiated the leases and started to receive payment. So we don't generally rent that out. I mean, there's been a couple of exceptions on a case-by-case basis, but we don't rent it out to the general public.
How do we make this building pay for itself?
Well, it's $7.50 a square foot. That's kind of like a steal.
Exactly. And I would guess that Mr. Dillard and Ms. Belloc, they're paying less than $500 a month for their office space, and I would guess that their budget has not been hit nearly as hard as ours has for home office space in their.
Did they get an increase? Didn't they just pass themselves an increase like 6 months ago or something on their stuff?
I mean, I see the benefit for having them there, but I think it also has to be the fair share to make sure we're not paying for it.
Well, they need to feel our pain.
Well, they at least need to,
I think they're feeling it.
they're getting it flat out dirt cheap. They at least need to, pay something that approaches closer to break even on their space.
Well, they used to have it for free. And I think, how long have we been charging them, Ron?
3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Because we did start them off there with no charge whatsoever. And then we decided we had to start at least covering our costs, so we charged this. The problem we would have is on any increase, I would have to go along with their contract also within their budget year, because that was one of the problems when we started collecting. Each budget was at a different time, and they had, I think Patty had just had hers approved.
Well, there's a difference in the way they're handling it. Senator Dillard is handling it personally and then somehow reimbursing himself to the state, I think. And Representative Belloc has the payments coming directly from the state. And frankly, they're significantly behind all the time in terms of getting payments. So it's actually nice the way Senator Dillard, from our standpoint. But just one question I had, when we're talking about breaking even, are we talking about something beyond the cost of maintaining the building? Or do you want to see...
Well, if we have a building and we are renting out space to people that, we're not using it, as far as I'm concerned, for anything necessary to the village. We don't have any village departments housed there. Anybody that is housed there could easily find other space if necessary, such as the College of DuPage, the legislators, even the chamber and special events, if they rented one of the storefronts downtown. I don't like to see us sitting on a huge building that is costing us money. It's not going to take care of itself with when it needs major overhauls, as any building does. And so in the end, what are we going to be paying for? We're going to be paying for space that really doesn't benefit the village itself. All of these people all of these groups could go somewhere else and do what they do very well. This could, quite rapidly, if it, if something major goes wrong or needs a roof, would be the biggest white elephant we've got sitting across the street. I don't like to see a building that is not making money, that can set money aside to at least keep up with any capital projects it needs. I think it's a waste.
A building has two big problems, two major problems as far as trying to sell it. The amount of space that cannot be used due to the foyer area and all of that, right, and the amount of parking. If, we could raise the rents in it. And there's been a lot of maintenance that's gone into that building since it's been built. We all know that. What's had to be done. The heating and air system had to be redone. Several of the floors, I think, have had to been repaired. There's been some major expenses, but I agree with what you're saying, but the only thing is, who's going to buy it?
Well, it's obviously not a seller's market, and no one would buy it, and it's questionable what to do with it. But how many years are we going to just say, well, we're stuck with this and it's going to cost us money?
It's going to cost us eventually.
I'm just going to throw this out there, but if, I'll go along with what you got now, but next year and the year after, if it's cheaper to tear it down and build a deck, this is throwing good money after bad right here. It's money we can't afford. So, all right.
The village did originally buy that property for parking. I don't know the history.
Yeah, I was at Metro when they talked about doing the. They were going to build the deck.
We actually had a grant, which we ended.
Right.
If I could, there's 2 items in there I want to bring to your attention. One, Fred inspired me last night, so I found a duplicate entry in here. Both in professional services and maintenance services building, you'll see the same entry for the automatic door repairs at $650. So the one in professional services could be eliminated. That doesn't close the gap, but there's $650. And another one is just an observation and to kind of speak to what we were talking about with doing more of our and getting more stuff done in-house with the right people and the right equipment. Since we brought on facilities personnel, and particularly the one that has a lot of HVAC expertise, we have eliminated the contracts for the preventative maintenance for HVAC, and you'll see that as a 0 entry in there. But if you look at the trend for how much money has been spent in maintenance services equipment, it's gone from many thousands of dollars down to, a mere $1,300 this year, and that's because we can handle all this stuff in-house now.
Which is really good.
Thanks to Mr. Tuccio.
Anything else for the Westmont Center? Convention and tourism in general?
Nope.
Is all that is in that fund. Next we'd have would be the employee benefit sick time. There's nothing in the actual binder. The information that we have is in the PowerPoint presentation, as there's not much to this fund. What this does is this is an internal service fund that we have to set aside to segregate money for our sick time benefit payout, sick time payout benefit. How it works is that there's a liability are accrued based upon when you hit certain levels for this particular benefit. So there is an actual accrued liability, which means the people, if they were to leave, they have qualified for the benefit and would get the payout. So when they meet one of the 2 criteria, it becomes an actual accrued liability. There is, however, then people who are accumulating time toward the benefit who have not reached the point of that. However, it is what's called an unaccrued liability. So you will see on here actual accrued liability as of April 30th, 2009 is just over $1,044,288. And then the additional unaccrued liability that is out there. So the potential liability as of that day on top of the $1,044,000 is an additional $1,007,994. Payments are expensed to the liability account, so they're not reflected in the expenses in the fund. So you don't see anything in reports like we do in here because it's all on the balance sheet. There's a liability that's reported in our annual financial report. And so when there's an expense to that, the liability is then reduced or the liability is increased when somebody becomes eligible for it and goes from the unaccrued liability to the actual accrued liability. But those are our current balances for the 2 categories based on the benefit as it stands right now. Any questions on the EBST fund? Okay. Just a couple of points on emergency reserve, which is our next one. We talked about this a little bit in our first budget workshop for the fact that we did have money budgeted in a current fiscal year of $390,000 that were in for emergency reserves to help supplement the deficit for the general fund, the expected deficit for the current fiscal year. I did explain that we have not to this point transferred any money into the general fund from the emergency reserve. We've been managing our expenses and monitoring our revenues, so at this point in time have not had to do that. We do not know how the rest of the year will shake out. We still have expenses coming in and have revenues that will be coming in as well, but at this point in time we hope that we will not have to transfer any money in to balance this fiscal year. However, we still do have that $390,000 that we were authorized to do so if we need to up to that point. But as of right now, the projected beginning balance for the emergency reserve for the upcoming fiscal year is $595,100, which does not include any permanent transfers to the general fund for the current fiscal year. Currently, we also do not have included in any of the funds any transfers out of the emergency reserve to supplement or offset any foreseen deficits during the fiscal year, the 2010-2011 fiscal year for the general fund or any other fund. So then we have a projected ending balance with revenue for interest income of $596,500. Balances are still there, and as of right now, that's a good thing. That's good news. Next, we have Section 10, which is the vehicle replacement, and there's several items to this. I'm going to start with, in the book, there are two schedules that you will see. One is an amortization schedule that says vehicle replacement program, municipal vehicle lease loan amortization schedules, which I will explain. And then following that is a loan proceeds funding. When the idea was originally assembled for getting a vehicle replacement program, the village, through strategic planning, had designated that this was something that the village needed to start to do, almost identical to what Ellen has just brought up regarding having an asset here that we are not saving in order to do large capital replacements on. That was the same situation that the village was in terms of their fleet. There was no money set aside, no program, no schedule for putting funds aside and saving in order to replace something that has a large dollar value. So one vehicle were to go, there's a large expenditure, and when you look at the entire fleet, it's a substantial amount of money, particularly considering the cost of some of the items that we have for our emergency vehicles in police and fire. So the board had the direction to begin a vehicle replacement program in 2006-2007, which was right at the time that I got here. What we did in order to start the program was we put together a schedule of all of our fleet. We evaluated that. We did an analysis on what we felt were appropriate intervals for replacement for each of the categories of vehicles that we have, and I'll get into that in a little bit as well, more detail. So we went through that. We identified the vehicles that we had. We identified vehicles that we no longer needed. We've reduced our fleet throughout the past 3-4 fiscal years, and we began replacing them. But in order to do so, because we didn't have any money set aside to even begin the program, we took 2 loans out. And there's some confusion sometimes because the technical term for this leasing option, or this loan option, is called a municipal vehicle lease. It is not what most people understand as a lease. It's not a lease program. We purchase the vehicles, we own the vehicles. It's not a leasing program like you would get traditionally through a car company. So it's essentially a loan. So we took out 2 loans in September of 2008 to get this program going, to start to purchase all of the vehicles that we called were in arrears, that were 13 years old, some of them well in excess of 20 years old. A lot of them had either completely stopped working or were held together with duct tape and super glue. So we took out 2 loans, one in the amount of $740,000 and the other in the amount of $1,015,000. In accordance to 2 schedules. One was on a 5-year repayment and one was on a 10-year repayment. And that was based on the list of vehicles that we were looking for and how these vehicle loans are set up through the banking, the standards. So longer-term vehicles could go on a 10-year lease and shorter-term vehicles with a shorter life were in 5-year vehicles. So you can see the 2 amortization schedules here for the 5-year and the 10-year leases, the loans, to get the program going. The second half of that then, and I'll explain, there's another sheet then that shows what we've expended for each of those loans. But the second half of the program is now that we have the vehicles, in 5 or 10 years, we don't want to be in the same situation where we say we have not set money aside to now replace the vehicles that we have purchased. So the second half of it was setting up a mechanism to fund this program, what we call a forward funding program. So each year we would set aside a specific amount of money, and it would accumulate and then would be there when these vehicles need to be purchased and replaced in accordance with that schedule. So we look at the value, we make some assumptions about inflation and what it would cost to replace these vehicles, and then we get what the annual funding amount requirement is in order to do that. We separated it into general and then the water fund, because the water fund is a proprietary fund, is responsible for theirs. So they pay a separate amount, and then the other amount is done through the general fund or some sort of funding mechanism for general dollars, separate from the water fund. So when we did receive the loan proceeds, you can see on the second sheet, the fifth third, the 10-year vehicle, we've expensed $847,445. So we currently have $167,546 remaining of this loan, because there are vehicles that we still have not purchased as of this point in time that we had planned to purchase with these loans. On the 5-year, we have not expensed any of that yet. So we still have these funds in our possession that must be spent on replacement of the vehicles that we had designated to get us up to date. So that's where we're at in terms of how we got to where we are, and the philosophy about forward funding and setting aside to purchase the vehicles. Then starting last year with the supplemental sales tax, we have a portion of that goes directly into the vehicle replacement in accordance for what's needed for keeping this program funded. So for this year, we have $893,000 of the over $1 million that we anticipate. I think it's 1.2. I'll have to look the exact dollar amount, but of the supplemental sales tax, a portion of it goes here. This is not all of it. We also have a portion going to the police pension for the $90,000, and then the remainder of it stays in the general fund for general fund purposes. We also sell vehicles that we have in accordance with the useful life that we have for them, whether they are continued use vehicles or whether after we've had a particular vehicle for its life, we do sell it, and any sale proceeds from that fixed asset go into the fund as well. So the money for that goes right back into here. So you will see sale of fixed assets based on the items that we currently have either proclaimed or intend to proclaim as surplus this fiscal year. Based on what we think the resale value is on those, we will receive approximately $35,000 in value for those. And then you'll see the transfer from other funds, the transfer from the water fund for $211,210 for their portion of the funding of that. In terms of the expenses, how we have them split up. So we have total revenues of $1,139,210. We have the transfer from water for $211,210, and then the sale of fixed assets for $35,000, and the $893,000 in supplemental sales tax. That's all of the revenue stream. That's all three of the funding mechanisms currently. In terms of expenses, we have $1,289,560. We have current year and carryovers, and a lot of these carryovers have to do with items that we have either not done that we were planning to do with the vehicle the original loan proceeds or were carried over from a prior year. The majority of those were things that would be paid for out of the loan. So for the police department, there's a total of $290,000 worth of vehicles for the current fiscal year that are in the budget. The current year has $226,000, and then there's $64,000 for carryover items that were budgeted in a prior year but that did not get purchased. In the fire department, we have $30,000 for one vehicle. Public Works, it's $883,000, $494,000 of which is current year, and $344,000 in carryover. And then the water department for $129,060. That amount does not match the 211 because what we don't do is we don't change the amount that you fund every year by what's up. It's that amount stays more constant, so it's easier to budget and stays more stable rather than this year if a big piece of equipment comes up, oh, now we have to put $500,000 in, and next year it could be nothing, so it's nothing. So there's a level that's determined, and the 211, 210 is where they're at right now with. So they're right at that level each year for contributions. So that's how the vehicle replacement fund is set up. In here, you will see the list of replacements on the blue sheet in the binder that lists the department, our unit number, who it's assigned to, the class, the replacement age, which means our expected life or our duration, the year, its actual year of the make or model. And then the replacement year that it was due, which is the current fiscal year, and then the current cost. So we have $855,060 of current year replacements that are listed here, including the two replacements for the water department. Beyond that, we have in our first white sheet is what we call the frontline inventory. That is vehicles that are replaced when they are new purchases, new vehicles. They're replaced with new vehicles. Because we also have a category called continued use, which are primarily squads and a 5-ton dump truck and our SUVs. We purchase our squad cars, half of them. We do 6 a year. And we have 12 of them. So every other year, half of the squad cars are replaced. Those 6 vehicles then, for an additional 4 years, go to other departments for other uses, what we call continued use. So the ED department for their vehicles, the fire department for their fire prevention bureau and their inspectors, some of the vehicles for administration in the police department, and administration vehicles for IT for moving computer equipment and supplies to the different facilities. They are continued use vehicles. They don't get new vehicles. So they're driving 2-year-old vehicles, old squad cars, and they drive them for another 4 years until then we sell them. And part of that was determined by the useful life as well as the mileage. Obviously, the 2 years that they are frontline squad cars, they accumulate an enormous number of miles. And then the next 4 years, they get much fewer. So at the end of the 6 years, they have a reasonable number of miles on them for a 6-year-old car, which allows us to get a better resale value on them. So the car is still in good shape, well maintained. The fleet department continues to maintain the vehicles, and now we have a 6-year-old squad car that's been used on frontline as well as continued use. And the departments that have been driving those vehicles then get another continued use vehicle when theirs is out of service. They don't get new vehicles. So there's no additional cost associated with those continued use vehicles. So we purchase the vehicle, it goes to its frontline usage, and then if it has a continued use, it goes there for the rest of its life, then is sold and replaced with another continued use vehicle. The vehicles on the front line that you see in red are the ones that are turned into continued use vehicles. You'll see 2 fire pumper trucks. The fire department has 4 pumper trucks, 2 that are frontline for a number of years, and then they are then as the backup pumpers for the rest of their duration. We also have, after the continued use inventory, are the carry forwards from prior years, the items that we talked about in terms of the expenses for this year, those carryovers you see in the Public Works Department and the Police Department, which were vehicles, if you look in the replacement years, they should have been replaced in either, well, as 2001, we had that was a leftover from the original ones that were in arrears, but 2006, 7, 8, and 9, in these fiscal years, for whatever reason, either we didn't get to purchasing them due to the fact that we were catching up with a lot of them, or due to budget constraints, the departments were very conscientious about cash flow and wanted to be cautious and didn't order everything that they could have ordered through the lease at that point in time, and decided to wait and do it at a later date. Still needing the vehicle to be replaced, but it might have been something that was a lower priority as opposed to some of the other vehicles that they needed to replace that fiscal year. So these are the carryovers that still need to be done. And then there's the list of the entire water inventory with the current cost of $700,000 and an annual of about $151. That was a mouthful. And I know you have lots of questions.
The way we used to do it?
Well, the way
we do it now.
The way we used to do it is kind of, I don't know, is willy-nilly an actual term? I'm not sure. They used to go in capital projects, and if money was there, the vehicles were replaced.
Prior to that fund, it would come out of the individual department budgets, and every year the department heads would submit a request, and basically it was internal in the departments in terms of evaluating the need to replace that particular vehicle. And then it would be part of the budget process, the negotiation, the budget process to try to fund that for that given year. So the idea was to set up this program, use discipline, and try to replace these on a regular basis, so we didn't get into a situation where we're putting large chunks of money into the budget or dedicating large chunks of money in the budget in any given year to replace a large number of vehicles, trying to spread it out over time.
Is there a ballpark figure or a percentage we can say what we've saved by doing it this way?
Yeah, there's a lot of items that we can tell you, for dollar figures that we've got for that. And then I think we started to talk about some of that yesterday when we got to the fleet department to see the drastic reductions in where they're at. I know Public Works Director May has passed out some information and I believe wants to talk on that because it does deal so much with his department.
It's a good question and something that it's been very hard to quantify because there's a lot of aspects all interlaced into the same topic. When we talked about the fleet budget last night, I pointed out to some budget line items that so we'd probably be referring back to. In the sheet I gave you this evening, the one that looks like a table, these are what we did was repeat the information that was in the fleet budget just for maintenance supplies and services, and then both for equipment and then for vehicles. So you've got the 4 lines there. And we ran it further into the historical amount so that you could see what the trends were in just maintenance costs until we got to where we started the program, and then you can see in the fiscal year 10, the current year we're in, how much all of that has dropped down. That's just the direct money that we're expending in fleet maintenance in the department, in the division. And the fire department mentioned moving more stuff in-house. I mean, these costs are reduced, and that by itself is a fantastic telling number. In addition to that, we're doing more things in-house. Since we have less old equipment to having to be handling, we're getting a lot more preventative maintenance done in-house. We are, with the newer fleet, you don't have to store as much inventory as far as parts in-house for the different years and all the different makes and models that are in there. And the outsourcing of the insourcing of all the preventative maintenance in the fire department, with the exception of a few pieces of equipment that they mentioned. On the other side of that same sheet is the chart. Actually, Spencer prepared this, but it's the amount of money we used to spend outsourcing the fire department vehicles. And it goes up and down, but you can see it before we started the program, which is that red line. At a high, it was nearly $54,000 a year just in outsourcing, and the current year we're at $12,000. So, maintenance costs are down. We're doing more in-house. Then, how do you add the value of the fact that the fleet isn't out of service? Any particular piece of equipment isn't deadlined. The cost is one thing, outsourcing it. The amount of time that you had to spend delivering it, leaving it there until they got the ability to work on it and then get it back, it could be many days before they got a piece of equipment back, whereas we'd do it in-house in one shift and it's returned to the department. If it can be, if you have to wait on a part sometimes the next day. So nowhere in here have we put assigned a value to what that, the asset of that turnaround time is. So all of the ability, the equipment you have afforded, the fleet maintenance department to do this work, and the tied to the fact that we have for average age, we have a newer fleet, so they're very, very, very more productive.
We've also looked at what we were getting for resale value for our equipment, which, at times was 13, 14, as I said, some of it over 20 years old. And we were getting next to nothing, sometimes getting nothing for it. We're able to take our stuff to auction.
And to tow some stuff to auction.
Yes. and we're getting, those items are sold, and we're getting good resale value on those, so we're able to put that money, like I said, that $35,000 back into this program. So that's helpful as well.
Well, the other thing you run into with your heavy equipment, and from past experience, the older a piece of equipment is, getting the particular parts to repair engines and blown parts have a tendency to be expensive because they don't manufacture those parts, and there have been times that they just don't manufacture the parts at all anymore, so you got to pull the whole engine, rebuild the engine, and go from there.
Or the same explanation with equipment, the non-titled vehicles, that's very true. The older it gets, pretty soon they just don't make the repair part inventory for them anymore. Or you're spending a lot of money to get it from very far away.
Well, to throw another question, how much equipment on a daily basis, drivable equipment, and I would say what's the best way to put it? How many pieces of equipment do we have, say, as old squads and that have been moved around and that literally sit every day and don't go anywhere? I mean, how much do we have any idea what that number is? Actually not used at all, that we really don't need?
We've evaluated, and we have reduced, as I said, our fleet as positions have been reorganized and reduced in departments, as we've consolidated some. We have had a reduction in the fleet, and the fleet department does look at that. They monitor the mileage and the usable hours on the vehicles, so they're monitoring it. And if there is something, we have discussions each year with the departments and with fleet and with Public Works about, okay, here's the fleet size that you have, and if you had a vehicle, the fire department did it this last year, where they lost one because they weren't using it on a regular basis, and they said, okay, we're able to do that. Yeah.
I mean, every department has downsized the total fleet through that evaluation. There's some telling clues, like we've reorganized the fuel distribution system so that we can tell now how much fuel a vehicle is using as opposed to how much fuel a certain person is dispensing. And so the fuel keys are tied to the vehicle. So if there's not a lot of money being expended in fuel, or if the mileage doesn't change a lot between its 3-month maintenance, then there's clues that that's maybe not necessary vehicle. And then evaluating that and looking into it, we've been able to make reductions. We continue to do that, and to keep a better eye on that, we have just this year. Ron mentioned how we used to all the vehicle replacements and the vehicle replacement plan per department was within a department, and then we all wrestled for funds each year to who was going to get vehicles this year. But no one person was keeping an eye on all of it. And when we were sending stuff out to SUFD or the fire department, the chief mechanic, supervisor didn't know what was going on with that. So To sum all that up, every single vehicular purchase that's going to be made, regardless of the department, is going to come through fleet maintenance before you ever see a purchase order for it or a recommendation. That doesn't mean that Phil is going to be, speccing out fire trucks. That just means he's got to review everything that's being purchased and look for things that can be adjusted, and work with the fleet manager in the respective departments before it's purchased. But he'll be the last signature on he'll be generating every PO for every vehicle.
You basically have a file system built now on every vehicle that we own.
We are going to.
In one spot.
Yes. We're realizing through this process that we don't have a good one, so there's different records being kept in different places, and we're going to centralize that.
Would the board like to see a longer-term history of the number of vehicles we've had?
Well, I think when you're on the street, when people ask, they see, it's perception. When they see all new squads out there and new trucks out there, they think that money's being spent to buy these things, and where are we getting that money and how much is it costing us. Yet when we had a fleet of beaters, the perception is that we weren't spending any money on it at all. So then you have to say, well, it's costing us less to do this, but we have new vehicles out there all the time. And it can't be smoke and mirrors. We have to be able to tell them, we've saved this much money by doing it. Not because Steve May says it's a good thing to do, but how many dollars did we save? Mm-hmm. And then I think you'll get public support if you can sit there and prove it, and then they'll understand it. But if you don't tell them how much money we're saving, we're just saying, well, it's a best practice, and this is a good thing, and this is a great thing that we're doing. We're doing the inside maintenance. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. But until you can sit there and tell them how much it is.
Yeah. Well, just the reduction in maintenance. I mean, that's not coincidental.
No,
that all of a sudden,
not at all.
So
not
that's a really good point.
Listen, if it was only $1,700
exactly
total, it's a reduction.
You got it.
Okay.
Plus we have one person down, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and we continue to
and we can continue to hold that
more
spot
efficient
and not have to do it.
To fill that position.
Right. That's a,
you've got a position that doesn't even have to be filled.
Lisa, can I ask you a couple questions? Bear with me. I mean, I must be a moron, but the municipal vehicle lease that you say is like a loan. Yeah. Now, you said we've got this money. So, for example, it's not like a letter of credit where we only pay interest on what we draw down. It's a loan. So the 5-year from Fifth Third Bank started on September 17th of 2008. Mm-hmm. The loan was in the amount of $740,000, none of which we have used, correct?
Correct.
So we have that money to buy new vehicles.
Correct.
But it appears that in 2009, by 2009, we would have paid $297 back in principal and almost $21,000 in interest on money we never used.
Well, right, we have the loan, but we still have the money as well. We took the loans out assuming that we were going to be buying those vehicles as quickly as we wanted to get through the arrears. We did not for a multitude of reasons. As I said, some of it had to do with the economy and the department heads feeling a little apprehensive about actually buying the vehicles. Some it was you didn't want to buy everything the same year. We were trying to do it in 3 years.
It would all get old at the
that.
same time. Yeah.
But my question is if you take out a loan and you don't use the money and you have to pay it back with interest, so by 4 more months from now, we will have paid $37,000 in interest on loan money that we didn't even use.
Right.
For the price of one squad.
Well, part of the point of the program, though, isn't it to build up the cash reserve so that when we do make the large vehicle purchases, we have that money.
Right. Well, yeah, this
That's
money
the way we went into it.
Yeah, that was the philosophy.
That was intentional.
Correct. Right. This money had to be the startup. This was the seed money to do it.
Okay. Was there any thought to negotiating with the bank that we would use the loan money when we needed it so we wouldn't have to pay interest on money that for no reason?
I didn't at the time. I mean, we didn't discuss that. We were planning on using the money, as quickly as possible to get all of it purchased.
The money is sitting in an account, which is earning interest for us.
Yes.
Okay,
So
but
obviously not at the rate.
interest as
Not
what
as
we're
much.
paying.
Yes, obviously not at the
So
rate.
there's no arbitrage issues. So
Right, yeah.
It's earning less than what we're paying.
Yes.
But it is earning some for us.
Yes, but you're right. We do have a loan that we paid on that we have not used that money to yet purchase everything that we want to, because we still have carryovers and items that have not been purchased.
And then on the Fifth Third Bank 10-year, we have used of the loan amount of just over $1,015,000. We've used 847 and some change, so we have 167 left, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have to pay that back over a schedule through September of 2017, correct?
The 10-year, yes.
Okay. Explain to me how we are going to replace, okay, we can rapidly use up the money that we have left, that $167,000, and then even if we finally use the $740 that's been sitting there doing nothing, we can rapidly use that up soon because it looks like our replacement cost, if we take the ones that are listed, as well as our carry forwards and our vehicle replacement water inventory, is $8 million. So we will be paying back vehicles that we bought in 2009 and 2010 in 2017, and what are we going to use to buy all the ones to make up the difference of the $8 million between 2011 and 2019 that schedule goes for? Are we going to have loans out all over the place?
No, we're funding it now to take into consideration. We overfund what there is in terms of the dollar amount that's needed this year to take into consideration the fact that we have vehicles out there that we are going to be coming up that we didn't fund for the first 8-9 years of their life that they should have been funded. So we're building up the reserves with the money coming in to take care of all of our future. There will be no more loans. These loans were the seed money to get us caught up to date and to start funding this program and to take care of the first 3 years of the program in its entirety because we had no money to do it.
Okay, well, you lost me how we're going to come up with the other $6 million over the course of 7 years when we're still paying back loans on seed money.
It's the $893,000.
That's the $893,000. Yeah, that's a supplemental sales tax coming in.
Tax.
From the sales.
And then the loan is being repaid actually out of the capital projects fund, the place where we had purchased our vehicles previously. So the loan's being repaid out of the capital projects fund. Each year we're setting aside around $890,000 to forward fund the program so that we're able to have the amount for the 6-7 million.
Okay, so you've looked at it over prospectively like 7 or 8 years when we've traditionally dropped significantly in sales tax. Are you comfortable with the projected supplemental sales tax numbers that far out?
Well, we're looking at what we need for the program, and we're using the supplemental sales tax. If our sales tax were to drop and we still needed money to fund the program, then the board would have to make a decision if there was another revenue source that they wanted to designate towards funding the program if there wasn't enough in supplemental sales tax.
Right now we've got additional supplemental sales tax. We've got some in the general fund as well as the amount on the vehicle replacement fund that we need to fund each year for a forward-funded program.
As well as money that we've designated toward police pension.
All right.
And the supplemental sales tax figures that we have right now are at the lowest sales tax receipts that we've had. So we would hope that the trend would be that our sales tax figures would go up, and that doesn't mean that we would need more money for the program. We would still need to fund the program at that same level, so any additional supplemental sales tax still stays in the general fund and gets used for whatever else.
Yes, I thought when we first talked about this with the board, didn't we have some projected, here's how much revenue will be coming in each year, here's how much we're going to spend over the next, do we still have those sorts of...
Yeah, that's the big long table that has here's what it is, here's how much it will cost to replace it all. And I think, is it on the front line one?
Right, I know the expenditure stuff's here, but...
Yeah, this breaks it down. Well, this has got the current cost and breaks it down by annual and showing the replacement years. But you can see we've got some that are out here. You know, our oldest one is going to be, 2020. We have another 8 years or 9 years of funding. But we take these and we divide it by the number of years that the vehicle has as a useful life to decide on an annual basis how much you need to replace that vehicle. So if it's $100,000 over 10 years, then we know we need $10,000 a year to replace that. That's how we decide the annual amount.
You mean like you have to set aside versus the actual payments?
And then when the vehicle is replaced, and we look at the current costs as well each year to say, you know what, that current cost, something has changed, whether it's a body style or an emissions, and those are updated during the budget process. So the annual amount and the actual current cost are updated if that's brought to our attention. So I know Steve did that with some of the vehicles, and Fire did as well, knowing that in the upcoming year there's going to be changes to emissions and that the vehicles are going to go up in cost. So we update those to keep those figures accurate. So that's the amount that we need to put in annually.
Thank you.
At least I think the program's a good program, and I was here when we first started. The question I have in looking at the vehicle replacement schedule, and if you look at, and again, if I understand it correctly, which is always a scary thing, if you look at, we're looking at $855,060 for 2010, 2011.
Correct.
But then next year, I'm only seeing 3 vehicles. That's not including the carry forward one, so that
Right.
we may pick up some of the carry forward. I understand it, but I'm only seeing 3 vehicles.
That's correct.
Okay. Is it beneficial to take some from this year and say, well, we're only getting 3 next year, maybe we could push off a couple to next year, stay on schedule, but we'll just move a couple? Or would that not be a beneficial
That
thing?
depends on the age and the condition of the vehicle that you've got. It doesn't change the need for the funding to be there. It
Right.
merely changes, when we're purchasing. So I don't want to make it seem like if I answer yes, you could do that, that's going to be some sort of a savings. It's just going to be a timing issue. That's all. We still need the same amount of funding because we funded a flat level to stop that going up. But there will be years you'll get a ladder truck or a large truck or something, and you're going to have over $1 million one year easily, and then the next year you could have next to nothing. So I guess depending, the department heads, would have to decide on whether or not that vehicle, for some reason, wanted to wait another year. The money is still there. They wouldn't have to, worry about losing the money if they didn't replace it there. And I think that's some of what they did for a little bit, why we have these carryovers, is kind of going, we're just going to wait another year. We know the money's there, but we're not going to order that particular one today or this fiscal year.
So, okay.
But it doesn't change the funding need.
To understand this whole thing, if we did move it to another year, we're not going to take the money and say, hey, it's the savings and put it in the general fund. That just stays in this fund. So this is
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would it make sense then, as Trustee Emery was saying, since we're paying interest, to spend the money? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but to spend that money?
Yes, it
because
cannot.
otherwise, it's not.
It cannot be spent on anything else. Legally, we took it out. It's a municipal vehicle lease loan to purchase vehicles.
Can you prepay it?
Yes, there's an option out. Yeah, so it's either return it or use it for the purpose that we borrow the money for, which would mean getting those carry forwards and carryovers
Might be
purchased.
next year if we're only buying three vehicles and the fund is built up, we might be able to pick up some of those carry forward ones.
Right.
Okay. I think that's I don't want to phrase it. The confusion is
Laundry, yeah.
Well, you think, okay, if we don't buy them this year, we could put the money over here.
Uh-huh.
But the way this was set up, we can't put the money in the
No.
general fund. It's
This is a
designated-
savings program, and when it's set up, and we talked about this a lot when we talked about it, this is not something you can decide you're going to go into and then drop out of and then go back into and then come out of. That defeats the purpose of a savings. We are putting money aside for these replacements because we know it's inevitable that we're going to have to replace them. It's just like Ellen was talking about with the Westmont Center. It is inevitable. It's just a matter of time before the HVAC has to be replaced or the roof has to go. Where is the money to pay for that going to come from in that fiscal year when it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars? This is the answer. And you can't decide, I'm not going to fund it this year. I'm not going to put anything into savings unless then at some point in time you're going to say, okay, now I have to make up for that. Because the schedule doesn't change unless we're going to change our schedule for our vehicles, which we do look at, and we have identified 3 vehicles that we feel comfortable extending the life of. The total savings on an annual basis is $17,200, but we continue to look at that. We don't just sit back and go, okay, we decided this, now we're done. Every year we go through the process and we look at this, and we did identify 3 vehicles this year that we do want to change. That isn't included in here that we have as a handout for you. So that's really the only way you make any kind of change or reducing the fleet, which we have also worked diligently to do and continue to look at.
Then based on that philosophy, which again I think is a sound one, I'm going to go back to Trustee Emery's comments on, and what you said on the Westmont Center. Yeah, well, okay, we keep it status quo for this year, but that's something we should look at, hoping that the economy grows next year, to start saving for those unknown in that particular building, or sell the building, or whatever's decided.
And that's very common in municipalities and government agencies. There's not just a vehicle replacement fund. There's usually a capital asset replacement fund, and you have a list of all of your capital assets for your buildings, for everything. Remember, this is only titled vehicles. We also have non-road vehicles that we have not set aside for. We've seen that with the sewer jetter and the grader and those items that we're trying to get into capital projects each year because they're not included in here. And the idea originally was to begin with the titled vehicles and then expand the vehicle replacement program to include non-titled vehicles, and then eventually also get a capital asset replacement. Unfortunately, these weren't the economic times to begin that either, but we have one program in place currently, and that's what we've got in front of us.
Now, we have to use the funds from the 2 loans for the vehicles. When those are paid off, or if those funds have all been expended, do we have to use... Does the rule of you have to use funds only for vehicles apply any longer? Like, say, from the sales of our old stuff, if they're, surplus is sold on eBay.
We can do whatever we want.
We can do what we want if we have to move it to a different fund. It's only the 2 loans from Fifth Third.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just so we're clear.
Yeah, every other funding mechanism, the reason we have the sale of the fixed assets in there is just to kind of help offset, it's an additional revenue source. It makes sense. You sell something that you paid for out of here, you put it in there. So, but you can use those funds for anything.
Yeah.
More questions, comments?
Well, I guess
it's a lot.
After that, all this being said, we had a couple items that we wanted that were on the help me out, purchase orders, and didn't we postpone those till after this?
We did.
Okay.
I think particularly for this discussion to kind of really lay out where we're at and what we're doing.
Recommend put those back on.
Those are listed under the carryovers, the carry forwards, as number 121 and 122.
Which ones are they?
21 and 22.
Right at the end.
On the last 2.
Okay.
2 pickups.
The streets, the 105, 106, 110, and 111 are purchase orders that have already been approved by the board, but due to the timing, we're going to actually receive the vehicles next fiscal year, so accounting-wise, we have to actually expense them next fiscal year, even though they're approved this year. That's what those are. That's the carry forward. Just accounting-wise, we need to do it.
And those would be paid for out of the loan?
Yes.
technically, and the one fund after September of 2017 will become a self-funded in-house
Correct.
fund, right?
Exactly.
Self-funding itself.
Right. So there'll be no additional loans out there, nothing, no other obligations. It's merely, then it's self-sustaining.
I guess I would ask then the question is that 2.5 cent increase that we're looking to possibly put on fuel, would it all go to the general fund, or would part of it go to this
I'd like to see
program?
the loans paid down.
Right.
And that would be, through capital projects where you've got those. So you could pay them off early with that and accrue less interest.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if this would be the right place to ask this. Okay, you put in here $457,000 on this possible fuel tax
427.
scenario. Okay.
Yeah.
My question is that based on if we acted on this, say within the next 30 days, and by the time it got done, knowing that it doesn't have to come through Springfield, but by the time we got it done, got it on the board, got it out to the stations in our village, is that a number that we're actually going to get back this year? Or is that number going to be decreased based on the time span that it would take us to enact that?
How many months did we look at, Spencer, for that?
I think what we did was we looked at the full 12 months and then took a substantial reduction from it.
So you sort of prorated it a little bit.
We tried to be
I thought that's what you said at the finance meeting.
So-
That wasn't a full year.
Yeah, I
Right,
think
knowing
the full
that's
year
not
would
a-
be closer to 500,000. So tried to be a little bit conservative in case estimates are off or depending on time.
Or the timing issue. So that is not the full then for an entire fiscal year.
There's a couple of things that can be done with those funds. I got another one, too.
Right.
That's kind of where we're at currently. The capital projects is the next thing that we talk about, which does have those loans in there. And I'm not, going through this to. If there's still questions on vehicle replacement, feel free to continue to talk about those. But I'll start with the capital projects. We'll go over the revenue really quick, and then talk about the expenses as they relate to the vehicle replacement fund as well. In terms of revenue for capital projects, we have $873,530. The majority of that is utility taxes, which is $467,000. $183,000 for ComEd, $73,200 for NICOR, and $210,830 for Telecom. We have $6,700 in interest earnings, $200,000 which comes as a payment in lieu of taxes from the water fund each year, and then we do have $200,000 in Hidden View Drive reimbursements for expenses that we have for the Hidden View Drive project. If you look at the expenses, we have $1,668,750. We have $500,000 in Hidden View Drive. Then you'll see the other debt that the village currently has, which is the debt certificate that we're refinancing for the 9.5 acres. This debt repayment has gone down. This is what the new repayment will be as long as we close by August, which we expect that we would be doing. So before our next payment. So this is the new reduced amount. We're saving over $250,000 on the life of that without extending that. It still goes through 2016. Then we have the VRP loan repayment of $278,110 for this fiscal year. That's for both of those, the 5-year and the 10-year. We also have the 60th Street Culvert Stream Bank stabilization for $152,000, stormwater improvements for $133,000, the sewer jetter for $80,000. Again, one of those non-titled items, pieces of equipment that are not included in the VRP that need to be replaced. Copier leases throughout the village. That's for village-wide copiers that we do a consolidated lease on for $66,000, which we're also looking into possibly doing a reduction. And Glenn Liljeberg, our IT manager, has looked into that, and we will continue to pursue that so that if we can downsize the number of machines that we have, which we did do a couple years ago, looking at once again consolidating, we would reduce that during the year as well. But if we keep it at status quo, it's $66,000. We have our stormwater study, what's remaining of that, of $48,300, which will not be paid out of the by the end of the fiscal year for the beginning of that project. So this is the end of that. comprehensive plan for $60,000, and then alley pavement restoration for $19,000. You can see how there's the portion of the loan principal and interest repayment in the capital projects for vehicle replacement loans. Questions on any of that?
This is an increase in the capital projects?
It is.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
Yeah, capital projects. Once again,
It varies.
yeah, those are not,
that's just-
they're not standard, so depending upon if you're in the middle of a project and you've just started and you carry over, or you've got a new project coming in that you've got money coming in for, part of it has to do with, Hidden View, we've got that 200,000 coming in, and we've got, stormwater improvements and things this year
Right.
that we're doing. So it's ever-changing. To see a 68% increase one year and a 40% increase
Exactly.
the next year is pretty standard. Same thing with motor fuel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
The important thing to consider with it is the funds that you've had before and the funds that you're carrying forward.
Right.
The amounts that we have here under the stormwater improvements were sort of the first level of stormwater improvements that we wanted to get done. And doing those along with our other general operating things will be just about expending the cash balance in the capital projects fund. So, and there's, at this point, no additional revenue that's designated for any future stormwater projects. So if that was something else we wanted to pursue, we'd have to look at some other option. But this will just about be reducing our cash balance in the capital projects fund.
And currently, the revenue that we have coming in, the new revenue that comes in each year into capital projects for those utility taxes will just cover the copier leases and the repayment on the 9.5 acres and the VRP loan. So those are covered with the utility taxes, but then any other capital projects that the board wishes to do we would have to come up with another revenue source for.
And there's some question on the one amount that we're bringing on the utility tax.
Yeah, that telecom.
The telecom number
Yeah,
that we
we've
still
seen
don't think
declines.
is right.
Yeah, and we just can't seem to get any answers on why that is, and we continue to look into it and talked about,
How much was that down again?
20, what's the percentage again?
I thought it was a big number.
Oh, it is. It's
Yeah,
significant.
we need an audit of that.
Yeah, we've talked about getting an audit of the,
Yep.
I'll look that number up. It's significant.
Because we're not the only town that has a lot of people getting rid of landlines, yet the telecommunication tax revenue is dropping.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little inconsistent there.
Right. So we will continue to pursue that and get the answer to that. We just have not been able to get to the bottom of it yet. Is there anything else in capital projects? Any question? Okay, so next would be the water fund, behind tab 12. The first thing we have that I want to point out are the fund balances for the water fund that we do put in here. There's 4 categories here on the line chart that's in the fund balances. We have the overall fund balance, the current assets, the interfund loans receivable, and the current liabilities. If you add up the current assets and the loans receivable and the current liabilities, it equals your fund balance. That's how it works. So what we look at is how that fund is, how healthy that fund is, since it's a proprietary fund, and where we're at with those. What we're looking for is obviously our assets to be above our liabilities. And then we have also historically used the reserves and the fund balances in water to do internal service loans, so that when we do have any interest paid, it's to ourselves, so to our own loan. So we're fortunate enough to have some reserves there that we've been able to serve as our own banking institution in certain circumstances. We obviously can't deplete that. They need the money to function. They need to be able to do their own infrastructure. So we monitor that and look at the cash balances. I did talk about earlier the fact that we did several years ago take a large loan to repay the ERI debt of $955,000. That was the balance that we had on there. That has been repaid as of this fiscal year. So there is only one other outstanding loan, and I thought I had in here. There we go. The $995 due from IMRF ERI was repaid during the fiscal year 2009-2010. The other portion that is in the $1,966,701 is actually an accounting loan that we do on the books as of April 30th of every fiscal year. It's not actually a loan, a conventional loan, because we're in arrears for a lot of our major revenue sources. When we accrue all of our expenses back, we don't actually have cash in the general fund the past several years because our cash reserves have been down and we don't have any excesses. So on the books, we borrow cash from the water fund in a cash flow effort, not because the fund is in a deficit necessarily from an earnings standpoint, but just the cash isn't there. Property taxes aren't coming in for the next year yet. We are still 3 months behind on getting our sales tax because we're 3 months in arrears. We are at least 3 months or more from our state shared. So it's just an on the books to say, here's the cash, floating the cash loan. That gets cleared off and redone each year. So that is not a loan that we took. It's called a short-term cash deficit loan. So when we look at the reserves and when we look at the loans that are on the books, we have repaid the last long-term loan to ourselves in the water fund. So besides that short-term lending cash to the general fund to get through that low purport of the cash flow in the fiscal year, we have no loans from the water fund due back.
So we have IOUs.
So yeah, it's a short-term little IOU. Yeah, but as I said, it's just an accounting standard, so that we don't have deficit cash balances at the end of the fiscal year in any fund. So that is that. In terms of revenue, what we have for the water fund, we have a total of $5,779,200, $2.2 million of which is the grant revenue. We have $3.8 million in water sales and $100,000 in another grant. We have total expenditures of $6,723,240, which includes items such as the roof replacement for the facility, ground storage tank maintenance of $240,000. The acquisition of land for a North Water Tower, which is what that grant is for. So if we did not get the grant, we would not be purchasing the land, and we've done this before, have had that in there. We have a South PA station for $250,000 and parking lot resurfacing of $200,000. If you turn in your book, you can see an operating expense budget history, excluding water purchases for the water fund from 2006 through 2011. It's important because of the nature of capital purchases versus operating purchases, where operating are very standard and stable, and capital fluctuates so much. When we want to look at the operations, we want to look just at that, and since water does both in their fund, we have separated them out so that you can see in terms of the operations what the trend has been in terms of expenses. We also took out the water purchases because that has changed so much and can change so much during the year, particularly the last several years. So if we take out water purchases and are taking out capital, you can see where we're at in terms of what the operating, standard operating budget is for the water department.
Pretty steady.
Yeah.
Now you know why the county wants to get their fingers on the funds from
Yeah.
water.
Cash cow.
I know that Mike Ramsey is here, as well as Steve May, for any questions on any of the items in the water fund.
Lisa, just one question. The $60,000 in late penalty fees,
That's what we bill customers for late payments.
and how high is that this year versus, I mean, it's 2009, I see it's 63,000.
Mm-hmm.
Dramatically up from last year, or
Yes.
the year before?
Yes.
Okay.
That includes commercial as well as residential?
Yes.
It's a 10% charge. Steve, I just have a quick question. Who buys the capped wells and why?
Nobody buys the wells. We abandon the wells and pull them, and we sell the property.
Okay, so you actually can pull everything out of there?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, we're required to. So if we're not operating it, we have to eliminate it.
Now, on the last page of this section, it says items for consideration level 2. So those aren't in this. That's if things
Correct.
are dramatically worse, they get worse, this would be the next area to look
Right.
at cuts.
The the level one cuts, just like with the general fund, were included already. So in the first round, what you've got included their level one cuts. The level two is the items for consideration that if the board chose to put any of these in, there would be additional reductions from the bottom line as presented.
In the event that cuts have been made or would be made that are, are personnel related or types like that in other divisions, we would mirror that through water automatically, whether it was needed or not.
So in terms of reductions in conferences and training, what was done pretty standard in the general fund and all the divisions and departments in the general fund, Steve and Mike also instituted those same standards in the water fund for consistency.
So what we're saying is the ones in level 2 are in the budget right now then?
No, they are not.
Oh, they're not.
The items listed on level 2 are in the budget, but you could make the cuts. The items in level 2 are additional items to cut. They're like the pink pages
right.
for the general fund.
So
they're currently in the budget, and you could choose to
So it says, one of them, just as an example, resurface lot behind water division, $200,000. That's in the budget
Yes.
due for next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the parking lot resurfacing listing. It's 200,000 on the slide. Additional questions for Steve and Mike on the water fund?
Just the one, I'm sorry, where it says buy land for North Water
I was
Tower?
just looking at that, too. I thought of the land at the S-curve.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of.
Do we have property that we're looking at and?
Well, we always have property that we're looking at.
Yeah,
We do not have any property that we're pursuing. It is an ongoing planning goal that our actually our total storage, all of our water storage devices added together are not quite up to what would be an industry minimum. So we're in need of more storage, and for operation purposes, the north end of town would be the ideal location to have that. So there have been areas that we've looked into. They all tend to be very expensive, so we don't pursue them, but this is in there so that when opportunities come up, they're accounted for in the budget, but we're not.
Isn't that 100,000 grant money, though? It's not budgeted out of anything other than grant money.
This particular year, it's for grant money, and we're we expect that to be a component of the next round of stimulus, so we're going to try and do it that way.
Okay.
All right, if there's nothing further, we're on to Section 13, the Motor Fuel Fund, and Steve can stay right up here because that's his area too. The first chart that you'll see in your book lists the motor fuel tax revenues from 2002 through our budgeted 2011. You'll also see the local share per capita rates history from 2002 through 2009. And the 2011 figure is the estimate from IML on how we would do that per capita. So that's what the budget is based on. We have in total revenues $730,500. That's a 13.5% decrease, $83,550. Consists of motor fuel tax of $650,000, $78,500 in grants, and interest earnings of $2,000. On the expense side, we have $2,285,800, a 4.3% increase of $93,900. That includes the following projects: pavement markings for $40,000, street resurfacing for $520,000, 2006 and 2008 CMAQ sidewalk projects totaling $228,000, Black Hawk Drive for $767,000, Naperville, Chicago for $101,800. Pasquinelli Ogden for $342,000, and the 59th Street improvements from Fairview to Williams of $287,000.
I'll just generally describe the fund. Everything in motor fuel tax, we use as, to expend motor fuel tax on any qualifying project, its distribution is coordinated by the Illinois Department of Transportation. So all of the, I'll just call it extensive paperwork and criteria and contract and processes you have to do to expend motor fuel tax are the same for the ones that we have to do for any grant monies we receive, whether it's CMAQ, STP, stimulus. They all are administered through IDOT, so there's the same process. All of these different grants have different features. Some are 70% grant, 30% participation. Some are 80-20. Sometimes the state does the disbursement. Other times we do the disbursement and get reimbursement back from the state. So everything in here except one is our participation to grant and to projects that we were already obligated to. So these are just our co-payments, and they're in there, and there's really nothing to adjust. The only one that isn't, it would be the balance of what's left, and under street improvements for the resurfacing, there's a, where do you put it, near the end, 2010 MFT resurfacing. That number pretty much just turns into whatever's left, and that's how much money we spend on the mass street resurfacing project throughout the town. And how much money is in there will directly correlate to how many lane miles of streets we can get done this year. So that street resurfacing one is the only one that's not already obligated. So unless you got questions about the individual projects, the other amounts are pretty much.
That Cass mid-block pedestrian crossing has been postponed. It's down on the bottom of the first page. Is that the one that goes like in front of Kaplan's and across?
That is the crosswalk that it's referring to, and the construction project that is being postponed is to construct it in a state that would more resemble what's going on at Quincy. So it's the lighted crosswalk features and to bring the curb line out closer to the through lane and just better pedestrian amenities at that location.
Yeah, because I know that's dangerous there. All right.
We've tried a variety of ways to bid that project out by itself, and it came in very expensive. We tried to lump it with a street resurfacing, but it was a big enough piece that it was a specialty thing, so it didn't really become any cheaper. So we're trying to find a way to lump it with something to get it done more economically.
Weren't they supposed to do that when they redid the other one? Or didn't we talk
Well,
about
this has been planned since the day that the existing pavement marking only crosswalk went in. So, I don't want to call it temporary, but that wasn't supposed to be in that condition when it was in.
No, but when they did the
initial
one over by
conception.
the tracks.
We did it by the tracks.
Wasn't it replaced? Or am I wrong on that?
Oh,
Or
well,
they-
there was actual problem we had with the lighted pucks.
And they were going to come back.
And-
Weren't we trying to get them to put the other one in down the street at the same time?
We would've-
Since they were out there?
We looked into that. It wasn't that straightforward, and actually the repair was done at no cost to us.
Oh, okay.
And the vendor that is marketing that, actually, we have visitors that come semi-regularly here to look at that crosswalk, so they want to make sure that it's in good working condition 100% of the time, because they're showing it off.
Tom, we could have two, they could show up.
It works, just people don't stop. There, is the problem.
The only thing, this is off the budget just for a second, but that crosswalk, we need to remind kids that when they press the button, that doesn't automatically mean the cars are going to stop.
They don't stop a lot of times.
No, and I've seen kids press the button and just walk.
You say kids, I say anybody.
Well, it could be anybody.
Adults
I've
too,
seen
sure.
that button,
I've
head
seen
down,
two
and
kids
just go.
recently. That's why I say
Yeah.
kids.
That's
They
what
could-
I do.
What's that?
I just press the button and walk.
Two kids and one village manager.
Noted that.
I don't know how you get the message out to people that just because you press the button and the lights light up, not all the cars are going to.
It's a lot better than it was.
Usually is the message.
Yeah,
I forget the message on there.
I just saw two kids recently.
Sign at
and
the
I thought,
button does say, I don't know exact wording, but it does say something to that effect. It's like push the button and watch for your opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know how you get the message out there for everybody, but.
Well, most
You
people
have
don't know
to
you're supposed to
read.
stop for pedestrians, even though
You
it's.
got to push the button and the spikes pop up.
I see a lot of cars do. A lot of cars stop. Yeah.
Let's put a camera there.
A lot of cars stop. I mean, I'm not. It's just sometimes you drive and maybe your mind is somewhere else. And
Well, the difficult one with that location is there's a tentative hesitation with backing stuff up on the railroad tracks, and there's always that,
especially if they know 'em.
should I be stopping, or do I have enough time? And then, not to get into psychology, but if you're there and you're approaching that and they push the button, it's flashing, and that person stays there on the sidewalk and they're waiting, and they're not making any attempt to go, oh, all right,
I'll just keep
I'm
going.
going to keep moving and get out of the way,
Yeah.
until they're ready to go. So you don't, there's a lot to
They
it.
step down off the curb, the people realize they're going to start crossing, and they finally stop.
I think it's better during rush hour when there's several people crossing at a
Right.
time. Cars are really good about stopping
Yeah.
then. It's with the onesie twosies that they kind of boom.
I did have somebody ask if they could be different color because they thought that color in the daylight was very difficult. At night it attracts the attention, but in the daylight, when it's sunny, the yellow flashing is not that bright. And, I've had some people
It's-
ask if it could be a different color.
When you have
but I didn't
yellow
know.
light
Well, even the
cameras,
color, it's
gotta be a
difficult.
different
That's
color.
why the signs flash too. I mean, for similar reason.
I said I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's the traffic warning color, yellow.
That's their warning.
Just reminding parents to remind kids and remind parents to be careful there still.
And village managers.
And village managers.
So far, it's worked.
Any further motor fuel fund related questions or comments?
I had a question about capital improvements. So when I was looking at it, I know on the pie chart you mentioned the stormwater improvements, and then we talked about the St. Joseph's Creek work too, but I didn't see the line item in there. Does that appear somewhere else? It was in the pie chart, but I just didn't see it in the detail.
The St. Joseph Creek is actually a liability expense. So it's booked as a liability right now. The money we've received is booked as a liability because it's not ours. Because of that, it's a balance sheet item and it doesn't hit expenses or revenues. So when we spend the money, we'll just take it away from the liability. It's just like the EBST account.
I'm satisfied that you know where it's at. I was just making sure we weren't forgetting about it.
We know where it's at. That's all you need to know.
Don't get too technical.
That's what I thought.
Just nods.
It's because of this special service area, because the money is dedicated specifically for that.
I mostly,
on our money.
like I said, I didn't want to forget about it.
Yeah.
I asked the same question a little while ago.
Anything else, Steve?
Thinking about it across the street.
On to our last fund, the IMRF Social Security Fund. We have total revenue of $2,405,820. This is a 4.2% increase of $97,095. The revenue sources are property tax of $2,199,920, which a portion of that is designated and levied for FICA repayment, so FICA and IMRF Social Security contributions throughout the village of $1,363,140. And the other portion is for IMRF purposes and payments, so $836,780. As I explained when we were in the property tax portion of the discussion in revenue, what we levy for FICA has to be paid for FICA, and what we levy for IMRF must be paid for in IMRF. Even though they are in the same fund, they have to be toward those, so those expenses are monitored and audited. We also have the water fund pays their contribution, which is approximately $190,000. And then we did talk about police extra duty recovery when there was a discussion about how we bill during the police discussion. I mentioned that not only do we get the exact dollar amount that we pay for in their salary, but we also bill them for the employer portion of FICA, IMRF, or FICA and Social Security contributions, Medicare contributions. So we have $13,400 there for that purpose. In terms of expenses, we have $1,578,000, which is a 27.4% decrease, $595,410. That is attributed to the fact that we no longer have the outstanding ERI debt to repay to the water fund. Our IMRF employer rate increased from 12.12 in fiscal year 2010 to 13.33 in the upcoming fiscal year. The current, actually it's by calendar year, so it's the 2010 calendar year. We did the 2006 IMRF ERI debt loan from water, as I mentioned, was paid off in the fiscal year 2010, ahead of schedule. So we will be conscious of the reserves that we have at the end of the fiscal year for IMRF, so that when we do the tax levy at the end of the year for next year, that we do not over levy and accumulate balances in the IMRF, FICA IMRF fund.
Lisa, I remember asking this before, and I can't remember if we ever found the answer. But a lot of, let's say, our police officers have extra duty, maybe at tie. And the new thing was now that they have to be, tie has to pay the police department because of benefits. Are we picking up any extra costs for retirement funds, FICA, any of those Social Security things that you normally as an employer have to put in? Is it costing us anything, or is the other companies?
No, we include in the billing for, as I said, we do pay FICA and Medicare funds, so Social Security and Medicare for that time. that's what we recover through here. We bill them for our portion. So the
Okay, so they are paying that
They are
portion, and we're
yes.
not picking up extra.
No, so the 7.65% that we are charged on their rate, we charge that exact back to the employers, and that's this police extra duty recovery cost.
That's what I was wondering, if that was, that's
Yes,
what it meant.
that's
So
what
that's
that
where it's
is.
coming from.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we also have in the book our IMRF employer contribution rate history from 2003 through 2010 calendar year, and then a listing of the 5 parts that make up the IMRF employer rate and how the rates are arrived at. All right. Well, now it's kind of back to the beginning.
So as of tonight, Spencer, how much are we short?
Back to your fund summary sheets.
If we each throw in $1.
As it currently stands, did we make any significant changes to the general fund this evening?
I don't think we made any.
No.
I think so.
I mean, we made, this evening, tonight?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
No. So we are still at 239,915 in terms of our projected deficit in the general fund as it stands, with the entire gas tax going into the general fund currently.
But we're still short $250,000.
Correct, and that does still include the $100,000 target for reducing our expenses in dispatch this current fiscal year.
It includes that.
It includes it.
It includes taking that out.
Assumption.
So if we
Assumption
were-
of a $100,000
Okay,
savings.
okay, gotcha.
The assumption is that there's a $100,000 savings.
And
Okay,
That-
good.
That would be necessary in order to reach that 239. That has to
It
happen.
has to happen.
Yes.
And then the gas tax of just shy of $500,000 has to happen.
Yes.
Yep.
Those are the two major assumptions that were stated in the beginning that,
Okay, let's get rid of the assumptions. How,
Then the number gets
Forward are
real
we?
ugly. Then the number gets
Almost
real
$1 million.
ugly.
Well, the gas
got the
tax is
assumptions.
something that that you're looking at going forward quickly. Is that a fair statement, or no?
well, that is something that the board would have to say, yes, we,
I mean, it's something we should, if it's in here, we should probably have it on the
we have
agenda
to
quite.
keep going.
well, you'd have to, you'd have
Start
to, as
discussing it.
trustee.
I mean, it would be
alluded
something
to,
that we
you'd
would have to act on
pursue it.
like
Yes.
now. I mean, we couldn't say, well, we need to talk about this, we need more research or anything else. It's something that, it's got to be like within
we
the
need
next several meetings, we're going to have to put something together and do this if we're going to do it.
Right, and so the public is aware and people know what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, yes. The dispatch, however,
That's a
who
knows?
question mark with who
That's-
knows. So if that doesn't happen,
Then you're at 300 and.
well, then we may have to look back at some of these level twos.
Right.
So we got to keep evaluating this as we do on a monthly basis and say, it doesn't look like this is going to happen. Let's review again. Is there something we could take out that'll add up to 100,000?
Right.
Ron, is
Or
there,
if it were, or if it were to come in, say we were to do something and it were to happen in a longer time frame, not as quickly, and we couldn't realize the entire savings, then, if there was a shortfall, if it didn't come in at 100 and came in at 50, then we would have to make up that difference.
So we might reduce a few things instead of eliminating.
I mean, myself, I'd like to try to get as close to zero as we can without having to jump into it going in.
well, we have to
budget
get
as
to
a
zero.
deficit.
That's the only way we can balance.
it's the only
So
Right,
we
I
have no
know, that's why I say.
Close isn't going to cut
But,
it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, reviewing it on a monthly basis, but I mean, between now and the 1st of May, technically, when we're supposed to pass this thing, we got to find that money out of here
Well,
someplace.
and there's another factor, that 240,000, 340,000,
Possibly, yes.
840,000,
Right.
if you take out all the assumptions,
Yes.
could be. We've got the state shared
We have no idea what
revenue.
they're going to do.
Ron, do you have an update on that, or do we have any information on that? So that number could easily, with the assumptions factored in, be right back at 800,000 or 900,000,
Sure.
Yes.
right?
We'll be buying canoes instead of.
Or more.
I mean, honestly, I think we're going to have to look at that situation, whether the state legislature goes along with what the present governor wants to do right now, I still believe somehow or another they're going to get into that tax revenue sharing basis, and they're going to do something with it to take money away from the municipalities.
Well, that's what they've been talking about.
Oh, yeah, I mean, whether it's going to be 600,000, I would say at a minimum, or higher. I mean.
So you think we ought to plan for something?
Oh.
Worst case.
Yeah.
The worst case would be,
millions.
Right.
Worst case would be 1.4 if you took out the assumptions and added in about.
Oh, no, we're talking with the state share, I think is
That's
what
what
you're
I'm-
talking about. Worst case scenario with the state share. I mean,
That 600,000 is on the low end.
That 600,000 is on the low. That's what they've publicly spoke
Right.
about and done.
Yeah, it could be higher.
Right, it could be much higher.
And the way it's sounding now, Madigan's trying to postpone any kind of vote and let them go home before even doing anything. So, I mean, you're just stretching this thing out even more.
Well, I think the other thing is that we have to get really creative. And Chief, can I disclose your latest idea?
Yellow light
About
cameras?
the range? No, yellow light cameras is yours.
Crosswalks.
That was Ellen's idea.
About the range? How about the range? Go ahead. Now, this is creativity at its finest, I must tell you.
It's also podium time.
Yeah, which we couldn't deny him.
Podium FaceTime. Go for it.
Stand over here, stand at a podium. There was a newspaper article recently, Glenview Police Department is renting out their firearms range to United Airlines, where they're training flight crews, deck officers and pilots that are going to be carrying firearms on flights. And they're receiving $75,000 a year from United for the use of that. I instructed Sergeant Dale, we talked about that today, thinking outside the box. Is there anything in a company in our town that we may be able to? Right now, our range is in need of repair. We were going to ask for repairs. It's $50,000. We think if there was an armored car company, if there's other security companies that need firearms training, do we lease out the range? It's something we're just thinking of. It's going to add additional wear and tear on our range, but it's also something, too, that we might be able to use as a revenue-generating stream.
The Andy Frayne crossing guards will have to train. Sorry, just thought it.
I'll throw that out there for thought.
But I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's the kind of thing, it's like, okay, we have a facility that's not always in use and, appropriate things drawn up for liability purposes, but for other people to use it for training could be a significant source of income because they don't have much choice for ranges. So that's a nice captive audience.
On the other hand, how much would be spent if we have a lot more shooting down there to keep repairs going? I mean, is this $50,000 going to let it last if we have a bunch of people down there constantly shooting, or is it going to be something that's got to be constantly repaired?
There's wear and tear on the bullet traps, but how we're talking about is the actual range system. It's over 10 years old. It's outdated. I think there's only one person in the country who's going to be able to repair it if it breaks down. We're experiencing troubles in our controls right now, so it is something that needs to get done in the next couple of years. This is some way we're thinking of trying to find a way to generate it. It will add more wear and tear on it, but it's also something to hopefully this use will get us to be able to repair it and pay for itself. It was just an idea in paper, and we just came and I mentioned it to Trustee Emery this evening. And
Good idea.
I don't know. I know other towns they haven't had citizen groups, but I was looking if there's any companies in town or in the area that would be willing to use this. It's something that we could consider, at least look into.
What do the villages do that don't have a range?
Right now, we have an agreement with Clarendon Hills. Clarendon Hills does not have a range, so they use ours. Free of charge, we have an intergovernmental agreement. They allow us to use their judgmental firearms training, the Milo system,
Right.
for whatever reason we want. Really. I talked to Chief Anderson just this week. He'll let our Citizens Police Academy in. Our current class may be able to get over there and do something. And in exchange, we let them come and use our range. We just give them storage space in our firearms room. And they're the only town that I know of in the area that have a range. Currently, we use the Lamont outdoor range. Most other departments will use an outdoor range.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious if there were a number that didn't have one, but Clarendon.
I believe Hinsdale is one, I'm not sure if they had, I know they had one, but I don't know if it's still in use. They may have other actions, but I just know Clarendon Hills is the one that came to us to be able to use our range.
I would be willing in the clerk's office to research and go back to doing passport training. I wanted to do it before, and some of us trained for it.
What?
Passport, do the passports.
But we don't make money on that.
Yes, you do. You make $50 a person.
Yeah.
Yes,
You do?
you do.
Yeah.
It's clear profit, yours, dead away.
Wow.
And you pay nothing to do it. They give you everything.
Instead of going to the post office.
Cost.
Yeah. Lot shorter lines here than the post office.
And you're by the train.
If we have the staff to do that and they have the time, because I know it's a lengthy process. If you've ever gone through it, it takes a long time.
What doesn't take that long? I just did it. It didn't take me very long.
Well,
yeah, because I did mine online, but I had to go to a person, you know, for some stuff. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
And I think the post
definitely.
office
We
only
should
does
look
it
into
certain
that.
times.
Yes.
We
And
should
not all
look
post
into that.
offices do it. Not all post offices do it either.
Right.
Yeah.
We just did our paperwork at home and mailed it in and got our passport back.
I did it at the post office, but it didn't take me very long.
What, Steve? Steve. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. What have we looked at as far as intergovernmental agreements for equipment that we don't use very much? Because I know a lot of towns are doing IGAs for, you know, heavy equipment and not necessarily earth moving, but stuff they're not using every day.
Yeah, I don't have any good detail for you, but we have two answers related to that, and they're both related to the village of Downers Grove. For at least a year, probably more than a year, we've been meeting with Downers Grove and looking for opportunities, not just intergovernmental agreements with equipment, but how to do cost sharing with purchasing. We've investigated salt. The one big thing that we've looked at, the village of Westmont, Downers Grove, Lyle, and I think Woodridge, we met about benefits of doing all our, for example, our streetlight maintenance contracting and lump that into bigger contracts. In that particular case, what we ran into is that our obligated contracts all end at different times, and our specifications are different, so we're all moving towards the same end date. So I think a year and a half from now would be an opportunity where we could get into something like that. With Downers Grove, as far as equipment, they're very good neighbors in that they, when available and they're not using it, they'll let us pretty much borrow anything. As far as an intergovernmental agreement, they have a lot of nice stuff. We're much smaller, not that we don't have nice stuff, but we don't have anything that they don't have. So it's pretty one-sided with that respect.
Cool.
So we look for that regularly. It's just hard to find a good partner in that.
Okay.
Steve, what happened to that LED testing we were doing with the back lot here? Did we ever get any figures on that?
Oh, we did get figures, and when we've tried to apply for grant monies for that too, the actual LED globe for the pedestrian level lighting is still fairly expensive. The payback was I forgot what the number was. It was somewhere closer to 15 years before you recoup that in the savings in energy costs, and there's like a 20-year design life, on the equipment. So it's not that we haven't shown that it's cost effective. It's that there's a very big upfront cost, and we're not prepared to do that. So we're looking for whether stimulus or other green funding opportunities for that. Most recently, we're putting something together. We're going to approach the West Suburban Mass Transit District about redoing the lighting, in and around the depot area for, looking for opportunities anywhere they might be.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Not that I'm in favor of this, but do we want to look at renting out the room at the Westmont Center?
I don't think you get a lot of revenue off of it.
We'll take Fred's $20 if we can get it.
We decided no. We're just at
Well, at what cost, though? Because what about security? Are people going to be wandering through it? You got governmental offices in
One
there
of the reasons we didn't do it
for
before.
a couple $100. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, it's a good idea, but I just, if there was nothing else like the Park District and it had one big room there, you might get away with it, but I'm not quite sure with.
We didn't have enough, we didn't have staff there
Yeah.
on a regular enough basis to.
So Lisa, are we saying we still need to cut then? Do we want to end up at zero? I know we always want to end up at zero, I understand
I think
that.
that's the board's desire, from what I'm hearing, is that to get as close to that zero, if, like,
So we need another 250.
So will we be looking at these level two, more than likely, this has been recommended, the level 2 cuts?
either, yeah, looking at level 2
Or-
cuts, or if there was something in the budget that you wanted to remove that wasn't on the list, or generating other options like you're trying now to do.
I hate to pick on Steve May, but
But I will.
how bad is that resurfacing by the,
I have the same thing written down.
for 200,000?
You could
It doesn't
bad
help the
guy.
general fund,
Steve,
just so
could
you
be a
know.
hero.
Okay.
It doesn't help the general fund, that's water.
Okay.
But you can still ask that question.
Well, there was a street resurfacing that was for the street division
Oh,
that
that's
has
right.
already
That won't
been
even
removed.
help us.
So that doesn't appear in here right now.
Can't do that.
You'd be looking at the general fund departments, the general administration commissions, police, fire, and public works.
Police fire most. I'm scanning police fire. I haven't even looked at mine.
Well, I do have to say, today, our police department was paid a very high compliment on a couple of our visits, so, I mean, the car dealerships are very happy with you guys and what you do. And
I'm
the
gonna
extra
put their
mile
money
you
where their mouth
take
is.
care of them.
We'll take compliments, but we like cash.
Now, you didn't say that before we went out there.
Oh, yeah.
Need to complain.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait a minute.
I just scanning public works and level 2 stuff, just to speak only to public works. Everything in here is to eliminate funds that we have already reduced. So this would take the reduction down to 0, and everything in there equates into some sort of loss of program or level of service. So there's a direct impact now to what the public would experience too. Except the little ones, but they won't. There's not $250,000 there.
The other idea that the Citizens Committee came up with was instituting a transfer tax, but I don't think there's all that many sales of real estate going on.
You have to go through a
Referendum.
You have to go
Yeah.
through a referendum.
Yeah.
process, but you're right about that.
Yep.
The exterminator's gotta go.
Well, I, for one, would like to digest this, because having, gone through line by line, now we all have to go back through line by line. So, that's what I'd like to do.
And I think that's a good idea. We just want to make sure that, listening to Steve, we could say it here, but what's the impact and the trickle-down effect? So it may look nice on paper, but we're going to have to make sure that. But that's what we need to do. We need to bring it up, have people think about it, and then find out what the trickle-down effect is, and if it may not be a good idea, and just keep trying.
I mean, the other thing is that you have to look at, and the one thing that every one of us has said on this board, is we are not going to tamper with basic services to the residents of this village.
Right.
Police, fire, paramedic, I mean, water, things like that. We're not, anything else, I think, is approachable in the budget, anything. I mean, I think anything is up for grabs, except for the basic core services that our residents are entitled to. I mean, I'm not one that wants to go through and start going through this thing with a chainsaw or anything else too, but I mean, I don't know how many options we have. I mean, we're kind of against a wall here, gang.
Yep.
And we knew this was not going to be easy going into it this year. We knew it was coming.
Yeah, but they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, they did.
I mean,
They've done-
I know, and I know that you didn't mean,
It's,
yeah.
I mean, they've done everything that they can possibly do. Now it falls upon us to take care of the rest of it.
Well, I'll give you an example, and I'm thinking of this, and I don't see, much in the way of luxury items on there. I mean, this is going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. But I think then I'm going to go back through and look at the items from the perspective of can we live without certain things without compromising service?
Right.
That's the question. And I'm going to give you an example because I pick on the police department more than anybody else because they're near and dear to me. For example, the AR-15s. Do I think they need to be replaced? Absolutely. Do I agree with all of the things that were presented? Absolutely. Am I thrilled that DC Gunther and Sergeant Dale went through and answered all of my questions and took the time to do it? Absolutely. On the other hand, I have to say, okay, how many times have we used an AR-15 in the last 5 years? Actually shot.
To answer your question, actually shot, no. Have they been deployed? Yes. And armed robbery calls, man with a gun calls, stuff like that, the officers will take it. By deploy means taking it out of the car, have it with them. Have they ever actually pointed at a person or something? I can't say. Have they actually shot? No, we have not had an officer involved shooting in over 30-some years.
It's one of those things that I look at it and, like I say, I think they should be replaced. Not replacing them this year doesn't mean that there is a resident of Westmont who is in jeopardy of being maimed or losing their life, nor an officer because he didn't have a brand-new one. That's the way I look at it.
It depends. That's why if you look at our level twos, we haven't. It's reduced the number that's purchased. We started out at 4. I believe we reduced it to 2.
Right.
We would just select. This is something that's been putting off. The functionality of the guns may be affected. I mean, if a part breaks, the officer doesn't own it, needs to use it, it doesn't work, then that's what we want to try to avoid. We did put in our level 2s to reduce it. We're fine with that. If we reduce it to 1, just as long as we can keep the program going and to be doing something,
right.
I would appreciate that.
And it's one of those things, if it breaks and it becomes inoperable, it has to be fixed. Leaving it inoperable is not an option.
We would do, but we may not know until if the officer was actually deploying and going to have to use it. If that's not the time we want it to know to know. We do maintain them. We do. We have armors that maintain them. We do use them at the shoots. Again, it was our level 2. We asked for 4, reduce it. There was some if you reduce it to even just 1. We thought originally that was my first impression was to go to 1, but then that would take us 12 years to replace this.
And plus the fact, I mean, at some point, certain things, just like we have items on there that are going to be replaced that are not going to be put off within a very short time. They could all move front and center and just en bloc be replaced. I don't think you should look at it that it means a commitment that it would take 12 years to replace them.
If we did 1 a year, it would take us that long, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Then it becomes ridiculous because long before that, you need the first one replaced again.
Right, that's why it would be a never-ending replacement program. That's why we asked for 4. Again, we put our level 2s, reduce it to 2, or whichever level the board feels comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
They can come out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got things
Mm-hmm.
5 people going to the chamber golf outing. With 5.
With the yellow light camera.
That'll be my job as a speed bump after a while. Can I leave the podium now?
That's it.
Thank you.
Sorry to use you an example, but it's the only one I had. We're sitting right in front of me.
Okay. Lisa, I have a question for you. I'm looking at the level 2 items for consideration, the pink sheets.
Yes.
I thought last night we took out the board leadership training for $4,000.
Yes, remember these.
So
were
we just
all-
haven't had these replayed.
Yeah, the pink sheet was the list of everything.
So
and
that's
then
already
they've
reflected
moved
in
to
here.
the items for consideration. So
Okay.
if they're on that list, those are things that you've already taken off.
Okay.
Now, under, let's see what tab I'm in. The Water Operating Fund, it's at items for consideration level 2. Those are not reflected in the pink sheets.
Right, they're separate because the pink sheet items all relate to the general fund, which is the deficit right now that we're looking at, trying to reduce. The water fund has their own items that are in their section.
Okay.
So they're not commingled.
Yeah, you can't.
Separate animal.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I take Trustee Emery's suggestion, we look at it, and maybe at the next set of board meetings or
I
something.
don't think we have time.
Well,
We have to
No,
approve this by when?
We're up against it.
Well, the current schedule is.
Oh, we can sit her
the
down and
current-
do it, I
The
don't
current
care.
schedule is the committee of the whole meeting discussion on the 30th, and then approval on the following Monday, the 1st May.
But we'll-
Obviously, I mean, that schedule was set, when the process began. The board would have the authority to change that if they wanted to.
Especially, the problem that I have is a lot of even the level 2s, I mean, even though they're valiant efforts, we're talking, a lot of them are, very small amounts of money.
$50, $150.
So.
To see those suspenders go.
We could try
They were
combining
pants.
our meetings, and that would save about $24,000 in a year.
I'm all
That's a
for
big
combining
chunk.
the meetings, because a lot of times.
I'm all for
By
it.
the time we're done talking on Thursday night, we all know how we're going to vote, and Monday's a
And
formality.
if we have to, we can postpone it to the next one, if
Right.
it's a real, but that would save a lot of money, right there. You got
Absolutely.
24,000 probably.
It would raise morale, too, because there's a lot of people that spend long days here with us. Hopefully, it would raise morale.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion.
That's something we're going to have to really.
So that means there'll be less podium time for the chief?
Yes, and
I'm
he
for it.
will
Put more
give
on
that up.
Monday.
That is
Well,
a
we have
sacrifice.
to take the bad with the good.
And Sue will be happy because our pay goes down.
That's right. That's
So
a win.
that-
It's a win all the way around.
Part of the
Win there.
savings, absolutely.
Huh?
Now, I would only say, if there's something that comes up with building, if the economy starts to make a turn, that seemed to be where our meetings lasted forever on Thursday night. When somebody would give a presentation.
But it's like.
And we don't have it right now, so I agree, but
We can always
But
go
after
back
you've
if we had
discussed it
to.
Anyway, when we vote, what did it take? 10 minutes? When you vote?
if you have a lot of those on the agenda, sometimes our Thursday night meetings.
But still, when it come time to vote, Mark, you'd only be there voting 10
Yeah, our Monday night
Our Monday night
meetings
meetings
are
are
15
20 minutes
minutes,
long.
20 minutes.
Because you wouldn't have any of the comments.
I just like I like the part about thinking about personally. Because then I go over I may take a look at the site, things like that.
See, I was going to say, there's been times I remembered on Thursday, you thought of one way, and Monday you came out with a different
You can
vote.
always
Yeah,
postpone.
But that would just be
But by
for.
the time you think Thursday, you know what you want, you may already vote, and it's too late. Then you got to ask for reconsideration. That's the
But
biggest
that would just
problem
be
with
for, I'm thinking building, new buildings, and we really haven't had that lately, so I would say, let's go
I
with
mean,
the.
I would say do as much as we can, but we may have to adjust to the two meetings. Like you said, if we do if something starts popping, if
Yeah. Well,
take for advantage, let's say something finally pops on 63rd Street, and they've got to do a very large presentation. We got to look it over. We got to consider things.
So
I don't
we'll
know
do
if I want to
meetings.
sit there.
Then
and-
we have a special meeting. I mean, I think
Why
we
don't we
can
do
do
it?
that.
Instead
You
of,
know, we'll just,
well, instead of doing the 2 meetings and saying, let's try to conserve to 1, let's go to the 1 meeting.
and
And
do
then-
2 as
and
needed.
do 2 as
Right.
needed.
As needed.
So the mindset would be, let's just go to the 1 meeting right now, and then if something comes up, we say,
And again,
and you
since we-
recognize it, that it looks like, hey, it's going to be a big one, then we'd have the 2 meetings.
It's going to be harder on staff than anything, because as I said, the moment we talked about it, the very next meeting, we had additional items that needed to get on immediately. He couldn't wait. So that's up to you if you guys want to keep postponing and doing stuff. But like I said, I relish
I think for $24,000, I'm willing to risk it.
$24,000
Try.
Ryan.
Yeah.
If it doesesn't work, we go back.
Well, how about
We're
this?
trying.
Plus, we're attorney fees.
If
I
you
mean,
want to make it, if you want to make it more efficient,
yeah.
Go ahead.
you want to make it more efficient. How do we get our Friday reports right now? Get it on a DVD, don't we? Okay?
Yeah.
Why don't we get what's going to be on the meetings on a DVD? We can look at it at home. When we come in here, if it's something we need to apply to survey or whatever, that's fine. Put it up on the screens we've got here to look at. Why do we have to have all of this paper?
All the drawings, you mean?
All the drawings, I mean, just
I know, you like the paper. He's a
everything.
paper guy.
You know, I mean,
I prefer the paper. I can't sit in front of a computer for 2 hours and read that stuff.
That would,
have a hard
that
time
would,
with that.
yeah.
well, I didn't used to, but I find it a lot easier now.
But if that's what it takes to save, I will do that. That's
you know,
what we need to
Can
do.
you figure out if we went to 1 meeting, what, and somebody brought this up already, what the attorney fees savings would be to us?
Sure.
Is that included in your estimate, Ginny?
No, I don't think so.
No, that was just our
Well,
fee.
I'm figuring him in a little bit.
That's just the 6 trustees, the mayor, and the clerk, right?
And we've got video people. And
Plus, yeah, oh, yeah, that's right.
Or would he
That's
have
a
to be
good
here
point.
anyhow? It doesn't make any difference.
If you don't have a meeting, he doesn't have to be here. If you don't have a meeting, he doesn't have to be here.
Right, so that,
No.
right, so that, no, I'm saying, so that knocks his down.
Sure. Yeah, we could come up with a harder number on that. Is the board interested, do you want a special budget meeting?
I'd like to
Before the next set of meetings? I mean, legally, you have to adopt the budget by the end of the first quarter of the budget year. So, we were hoping to adopt it at the beginning of May. It doesn't have to legally be adopted by that point in time. But there is an open Monday, next Monday, and I don't remember, Lisa, if there was any reason why we didn't include that in our,
This coming Monday?
Because we didn't think that we would need more than 3.
yeah.
That's
May
the only
3rd?
reason.
No.
April 26th.
Oh, April 26th.
If you did want some days to look it over, we are going to have an executive session to discuss some other things, give you some time to think about that, all this stuff, and we could have another workshop before the actual budget presentation, or we could go forward with the budget presentation, have more discussion, and then act on it at a later date.
Well, I think maybe we need to do the executive session, because I'm sure there's stuff there that we're going to have to chew on too. And I think we need to have another meeting, because I think when we go to present this budget, it needs to be in the best final form that it can possibly be in when we present it.
Well, that's the only way we can vote on it.
Well, I know. All I'm saying is, if we have to have another special meeting, we have another special meeting.
Yeah, I say let's set one up for Monday.
But I mean, I'm sure there's some other things that we need to talk about, take in consideration too, which would give us time to think about that too. After the executive session, because I'm sure there's stuff we're going to have to figure out there too. Or stuff that we may want to think about over the weekend after we talk about it.
Yep.
The hardest thing is that there's so many unknowns hanging out there. I mean, we've got the contract hanging out there.
And we need to be proactive.
Things you can't. You're not going to know.
No, we're never going to know. I mean, not by...
You always build budgets on certain, on assumption.
Let's give this executive session.
To some extent, you have to react.
I should have a lot more this year than we next year.
So are we saying?
A lot more.
We're going to meet on Monday.
Right.
That's what I'm
Plan.
hearing.
Will we get Are we looking to try to get numbers to what it would be for one meeting then, too?
Yeah, we'll have
possible?
some more comprehensive numbers for that.
Okay.
One meeting, you said, or two?
Go to one meeting.
Go to one meeting.
So
Well, one
it'd be
meet- no,
two as
two meet-
needed, 2 meetings that
Two
we
meetings a
would
month.
2 meetings a
eliminate.
month.
We'd eliminate.
Yeah.
Eliminate two.
So they would they be the Monday ones? Because
That would be
does
up to
the
you.
ordinance provide that that's when the village
If-
board meeting is?
If we did it,
You're going to change, probably want to change the ordinance.
Yep.
And do them Thursday nights, or what do we want to do?
I was going to say, if we did it on Thursday,
Trustee-wise, you're looking at.
and something came
Right,
up,
what
we'd
about
have
the,
time to publish for Monday,
Executive session you requested.
if we had to.
For tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I suppose if we did it on Monday, we could
Our
publish for that
step,
next
our
Thursday.
meeting on
Are you hearing what she's
Monday,
saying?
But
No, I
Say it again.
No.
still need to use the motion tonight.
Well, we're just, Ron had asked about what, or somebody asked about what day. And I said, if we did everything on a Thursday, if something came up at the meeting, we'd have time to publish
You still
if
got
we had
the
to come on
48
Monday.
days,
And
or 48 hours.
Right.
But I suppose even if you did it on Monday, you could publish for Thursday, but, you know, because we'd have to change the ordinance anyway, but
So we've agreed to meet on Monday, but the manager has also requested an executive session tonight regarding personnel.
Right.
We are past our time, but are we going to go
Sure,
into that
yes.
executive session?
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, I'll move that we do.
I'll second that we do.
Our next move. We have a motion to go into executive session. Do we have a second?
We do? Me? Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Emery.
Yes.
Trustee Forsley.
Yes.
Trustee Scott.
Yes.
Trustee Fleming.
Yes.
Trustee Klebanow.
Yes.
Trustee Seneca.
Yes.
Thank you. We're in executive session.
Brian?
Stay a little-